ताज़ा तरीन अपलोड्स की नोटिफिकेशन हासिल करने के लिए हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें और साथ में दिए गए घंटी के निशान को दबाना ना भूलें।
Nay, to this very day, anyone in whose heart the wayfarers Laxman, Sita ji and Ramji should ever lodge even in a dream shall find the road leading to Shri Ramji's abode, the divine region known by the name of Saket, the road that scarce any anchorite may find. Then perceiving that Sita ji was tired and seeing a banyan tree and cool water hard by, the hero of Raghu's line partook of bulbs, roots and fruits, staying there overnight, and bathing at dawn the Lord of Raghus proceeded further. And beholding lovely woods, lakes and hills, the Lord reached the hermitage of Valmik ji. Shri Ramji saw the sage's beautiful dwelling with its charming hills and forest and its sacred waters. The lotuses in the ponds and the trees in the woods were in blossom. Intoxicated with their honeybees sweetly hummed over them. Birds and beasts made a tumultuous noise and moved about in joy, free from all animosities. The lotus-eyed Ramji rejoiced to behold the sacred and lovely hermitage, and hearing of the arrival of Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, the sage came forth to receive him. Shri Ramji fell prostrate before the sage, and the holy Brahmana blessed him in return. The sight of Shri Ramji's beauty gladdened his eyes, and with due honor he took the Lord into the hermitage. Finding the guest as dear to him as the life itself, the holy sage sent for delicious bulbs, roots and fruits. Sita ji, Laxman and Ramji partook of those fruits, and the sage then assigned them beautiful quarters. Great was the joy of Valmiki ji's heart as he beheld with his own eyes Shri Ramji, who was bliss personified. Joining his lotus palm, the Lord of Raghus then spoke to him in words which were delightful to the ears. You directly perceive everything relating to the past, present and future, O Lord of sages. The whole universe is as if in the palm of your hand. Saying so, the Lord related to him the whole story as to how the Queen Kaikeyi had exiled him into the woods. Compliance with my father's commands, gratification of my mother, the installation of a brother like Bharat to the throne, and my seeing you, all this, my Lord, is the result of my meritorious acts. In beholding your feet, O King of Sages, all my good deeds have been rewarded. Now I intend to go wherever you command me to go, and where no anchorite may feel disturbed. For such monarchs as prove a source of annoyance to hermits and ascetics are consumed without fire. While the satisfaction of Brahmanas is the root of happiness, their wrath consumes billions of generations. Bearing this in mind, pray tell me a place to which I may proceed with Sita and Laxman. And building a charming hut of leaves and grass may spend some time there, O good sir. Hearing these guileless and unsophisticated words of Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, the enlightened sage exclaimed, Quite so, right you are. Why should you not speak thus, O glory of Raghu's line, ever busy as you are in maintaining the laws laid down by the Vedas? While you are the custodian of the Vedic laws and the Lord of the universe, Sita ji, Janakji's daughter, is your Maya, divine energy, who creates, preserves and dissolves the universe on receiving the tacit approval of your gracious self. As for Laxman, he is no other than the thousand-headed Sesha, the Lord of Serpents, the supporter of the globe and the Lord of the entire creation, both animate and inanimate. Having assumed the form of a king for the sake of the gods, you are out to crush the host of wicked demons. Your being, O Ram, is beyond the range of speech and beyond conception, unknown, unutterable and infinite. The Vedas ever speak of it as not that, not that. This world is a spectacle and you are its spectator. Nay, you make even Brahmaji the creator, Vishnuji the preserver and Shambhuji the destroyer dance to your tune. Even these latter know not your secret. Who else can know you? In fact, he alone can know you, to whom you make yourself known, and the moment he knows you, he becomes one with you. It is by your grace, O delighter of Raghus, that your votaries come to know you, O comforter of the heart of devotees. Your body is all consciousness and bliss and is devoid of change. It is the component alone who realize this. It is for the sake of saints and gods that you have assumed a human semblance and speak and act even worldly monarchs do. The stupid get puzzled while the wise feel delighted when they see or hear of your doings. All that you say or do is true, for one should play the role one has assumed on the stage. You ask me, where should I take up my residence? But I ask you with a diffidence, tell me first the place where you are not, then alone I can show you a suitable place. On hearing the sage's words, imbued as they were with love, Shri Ramji felt abashed and smiled within himself. Valmiki ji too smiled and spoke to him again in words as sweet as though they were steeped in nectar. Listen, Ram, I tell you now the places where you should abide with Sita and Laxman. The heart of those whose ears are like the ocean, constantly replenished with a number of lovely streams in the shape of your stories. But no surfeit shall be your charming abode. Again, the heart of those whose eyes long to see you, even as the Kataka bird longs to see the rain cloud, and disdaining like the same bird rivers, oceans and big lakes, derive satisfaction from a drop of your rain-like beauty. It is their heart alone which shall serve as your delightful home, where you and your younger brother Laxman and Sita may take up your abode. Nay, you should dwell in the heart of him whose swan-like tongue picks up pearls in the shape of your virtues in the holy Mansarovar lake of your fame. Abide, O Ram, in the mind of those whose nose devotedly inhales every day the fragrance of the sacred and lovely offerings in the shape of flowers, sandal paste, etc., made to their Lord, who eat only that which has been offered to you and put on clothes and ornaments first dedicated to you, whose heads bow down most submissively and lovingly at the sight of a god, preceptor or Brahmana, whose hands adore Shri Ramji's feet every day, who cherish in their heart faith in Ramji and none else, and whose feet take them to holy places sacred to Ramji. Again, those who are ever engaged in muttering the Ram mantra, Shri Ramaya Namaha, the king of all sacred formulas, and worship you along with your associates, who offer water to the mains and pour oblations into the sacred fire in diverse ways, who feed the Brahmanas and bestow liberal gifts on them, and who look upon their preceptor as greater than yourself, and wait upon him with due honor and entire devotion, and who, having done all this, ask only one boon as their reward. Let me have your devotion to Shri Ramji's feet. Enthrone yourself in the temple of their heart, both Sita ji and yourself, the delighter of Raghus. Those who have no lust, anger, arrogance, pride or infatuation are without greed, excitement, attraction or aversion, and who are free from fraud, hypocrisy and deceit. It is in their heart that you should abide, O Chief of Raghus. Again, those who are beloved of all and friendly to all, to whom joy and sorrow, applause and abuse are alike, and who scrupulously utter truthful and polite words, nay, who are resigned to you whether awake or asleep, and who have no support other than yourself, it is in their mind, O Ram, that you should dwell. Again, those who look upon another's wife as their own mother, and to whom another's wealth is the deadliest of all poisons, who rejoice to see others' prosperity and are particularly grieved to see another's distress, and to whom, O Ram, you are dear as their own life, their minds are your blessed abodes. Nay, those to whom, my dear, you are at once master and companion, father and mother, preceptor and everything else. It is in the temple of their mind that Sita ji and you two brothers should reside. Those who overlook others' faults and pick out their virtues and endure hardships for the sake of Brahmanas and cows, nay, who have established their reputation in the world as well versed in the laws of propriety, their mind is your excellent abode. Again, he who attributes his virtues to you and holds himself responsible for his faults, nay, who entirely depends on you and loves Shri Ramji's, your devotees, it is his heart that you should stay along with Videha's daughter Sita ji. He who, renouncing his caste and kinsmen, wealth, faith and glory, his near and dear ones, his happy home and everything else, cherishes you in his bosom, in his heart you should take up your residence, O Lord of Raghus. Again, he whom heaven and hell and even freedom from birth and death are the same, inasmuch as he beholds you armed with a bow and arrow here, there and everywhere, and who is your servant in thought, word and deed. Make his heart, O Ram, your permanent abode. Lastly, he who wants nothing at any moment and bears natural affinity to you incessantly dwell in his mind, for that is your own home. The eminent sage Valmik ji thus showed him many a dwelling place, and his loving words gladdened Shri Ramji's soul. Listen, O Lord of the solar rays, the sage continued. I now tell you a retreat that will be delightful in the existing circumstances. Take up your abode on the Chitrakoot hill. There you will have comforts of every kind. Charming is the hill and lovely the forest, which is the haunt of elephants, lions and deer as well as of birds. It is a holy river glorified in the Puranas, which was brought by the sage Atri's wife by dint of her penance. It is a side stream of the Ganga and is known by the name Mandakini, which is quick to destroy sins even as a witch strangles infants. Many great sages like Atri dwell there practicing yoga and muttering sacred formulas and wasting their bodies with penance. Wend your way thither, Ram, and reward the labors of all, conferring dignity on this great mountain as well. The great sage Valmiki then described at length the infinite glory of Chitrakoot, and the two brothers proceeded with Sitaji and bathed in the sacred stream. Shri Ramji, the crest of Raghu's line, said, Laxman, here is a good descent into the river. Now make arrangements for our stay somewhere. Laxman presently surveyed the north bank of the Payaswini river and said, Lo, our rivulet bends round this bank like a bow with the river itself for its string. Control of the mind and senses and charity of its arrows, and all the sins of the Kali Yuga for its many queries. Armed with this bow, Mount Chitrakoot looks like an immovable huntsman who takes unerring aim and makes a frontal attack. With these words, Laxman showed the spot, and Shri Ramji was delighted to see the sight. When the gods learnt that the sight had captivated Shri Ramji's mind, they proceeded to Chitrakoot with Vishwakarmaji, the chief of heavenly architects. They all came in the guise of kolas and bheels and put up beautiful dwellings of leaves and grass. They made a pair of huts which were lovely beyond words. The one a fine little cottage and the other larger in size. Adorning the beautiful cottage with the Laxman and Janakji's daughter Sitaji, the Lord looked as charming as the god of love, accompanied by his consort Ratiji, and the deity presiding over spring, the king of seasons, all attired as hermits. Gods, Nagas, Kinnaras, and the guardians of the 8 quarters flocked to the Chitrakoot on that occasion. Shri Ramji made obeisance to them all, and the gods were glad to obtain the reward of their eyes. Raining flowers, the heavenly host exclaimed, Lord, we feel secure today. With great supplication they described their terrible woes and returned joyfully to their several abodes. Hermits streamed in as they heard the news that Shri Ramji, the delighter of Raghus, had taken up his abode at Chitrakoot. The moon of the solar rays fell prostrate when he saw the holy company coming with a cheerful countenance. The hermit pressed Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, to their bosom and invoked their blessings on him just in order to see them come true. As they gazed on the beauty of Sitaji, Laxman, Sumitra's son, and Ramji, they accounted all their spiritual practices fully rewarded. After paying them due honors, the Lord dismissed the holy throng, and they practiced yoga, contemplation, jap, muttering of prayers, and austerities, and performed sacrifices unmolested in their own retreats. When the kolas and bheels got this news, they felt as delighted as though the 9 heavenly treasures of Kuvera had found their way to their own house. With cups of leaves full of bulbs, roots and fruits, they sallied forth as paupers to gather gold as spoils. Such of them as had already seen the 2 brothers were questioned about them by the others who proceeded along with the same road. Describing and hearing of Shri Ramji's beauty, they all came and beheld the Lord of Raghus. Placing their offerings before the Lord, they greeted him and regarded him with deep affection. They stood here and there as so many painted figures, thrilling all over and with tears streaming from their eyes. Shri Ramji perceived that they were all overwhelmed with emotion and addressing kind words to them, treated them all with honor, while they in their turn greeted the Lord again and again, and with joined palms spoke to him in polite terms. Having seen your feet, O Lord, we all feel secure now. Our good luck is responsible for your visit to this place, O Lord of Ayodhya. Blessed is the land, forest, road and hill where you have planted your foot, my Lord. Fortunate are the birds and the beasts of the forest whose life has been crowned by your sight. And lucky are we all, along with our family, in that we have been able to feast our eyes on your beauty. You have chosen an excellent spot wherein to take up your abode. You will be comfortable here during all the seasons. We will render all sorts of services to you, keeping away elephants and lions, serpents and tigers. The dreary forest, hills, caves and ravines have all been explored by us foot by foot, O Lord. We will take you for hunting to the different haunts of game, and we will show you lakes and springs and other reservoirs of water. We and our people are your servants, therefore do not hesitate to command us, O Lord. The same gracious Lord whom Vedic texts fail to describe and the mind of hermits cannot reach, listen to the words of the Bhils, even as a father listens to the words of his children. Love alone affects Shri Ramji. Let those who are curious take note of it. Shri Ramji then gratified all the foresters by addressing to them gentle words sweetened by love. Dismissed by him, they bowed their head to him and departed. And discussing the virtues of the Lord, they returned to their respective homes. In this way, Sita ji and the two brothers lived in the forest, delighting the gods and the hermits. Ever since the Lord of Raghus came and took up his abode there, the forest became a fountain of blessings. Trees of various kinds blossomed and bore fruit, and lovely creepers that coiled about them formed an excellent canopy. They were all naturally beautiful like the trees of the heaven. It seemed as if the latter had abandoned the celestial groves and migrated to that spot. Strings of bees made an exceedingly sweet humming sound, and a delightful breeze breathed soft, cool and fragrant. The bull jay, cuckoos, parrots, katakas, chakravakas, kakoras and the other birds delighted the ear and ravished the soul with their varied notes. Elephants, lions, monkeys, boars and deer all sported together, free from enmity. Herds of deer were enraptured when they beheld the beauty of Shri Ramji roaming about in search of prey. All the forests of gods existing in the universe were filled with envy at the sight of Shri Ramji's forest. The heavenly river Ganga, Saraswati, the sun-born Yamuna, Narmada, the daughter of Mount Mekala, the blessed Godavari, and the various other lakes, seas, streams and rivers all extolled the Mandakini. The eastern and western hills, from and behind which the sun is believed to emerge and disappear every morning and evening, Mount Kailas, the abode of Lord Shivji, Mandara, Meru, all abodes of gods, and mountains like the Himalayas, all sang praises of Chitrakoot. Glad was the deity presiding over the Vindhya range, whose delight was more than his heart could contain, to think that he had won such great renown without much exertion. Blessed and full of merit are all the birds and deer, creepers, trees, and the various species of herbage of Chitrakoot. So declared the gods day and night. Having beheld the chief of Raghu's line, those who had eyes attained the end of their life and were rid of sorrow, whereas inanimate objects rejoiced at the touch of the very dust of his feet and became eligible for attaining the highest state, blessedness. The forest and hill where that ocean of bliss Shri Ramji took up his abode were naturally lovely, auspicious, and the holiest of the holy. How could it be possible to glorify them? The exquisite beauty of the forest where Sita ji, Laxman, and Shri Ramji came and settled, taking leave of the ocean of milk and bidding adieu to Ayodhya, could not be described even by 100,000 seshas, each with 1,000 pairs of tongues. How then can I describe it at some length any more than a tortoise of living in a puddle can lift Mount Mandara? Laxman waited upon Shri Ramji's in thought, word and deed with an amiability and devotion more than one could tell. Gazing on the feet of Sita ji and Ramji every moment and conscious of their love for him, Laxman never recalled even a dream his younger brother Shatrughan, father, mother, or even his home. In Shri Ramji's company, Sita ji lived a happy life, forgetting her own Ayodhya, family and home. Ever watching the moon-like face of her beloved Lord, she was extremely glad, like the young of a kakora bird. Finding her Lord's affection grow from day to day, she remained happy as a chakravaka bird during the day. Her mind was so enamored of Shri Ramji's feet that the forest appeared to her as dear as 1,000 Ayodhyas. Dear was the hut of leaves in the company of her most beloved Lord, while fawns and birds constituted her beloved family. The holy hermits appeared to her as her own father-in-law and their spouses as her mother-in-law, while her diet consisting of bulbs, roots and fruits tasted like ambrosia. Shared with her spouse, even the lovely litter of leaves delighted her as hundreds of Cupid's own beds. Can the charm of sensuous enjoyments ever enchant her, whose very look confers the sovereignty of a sphere? Fixing their thoughts on Shri Ramji, his devotees spurn the pleasure of sense as with no more than a piece of straw. It is no wonder then, in the case of Sita ji, Shri Ramji's beloved consort and the mother of the universe, the Lord of Raghus would do and say only that which would please Sita ji and Laxman. He would narrate old legends and stories to which Laxman and Sita ji would listen with great delight. Every time Shri Ramji thought of Ayodhya, his eyes filled with tears. The gracious Lord became sad when he recalled his father and mother, his family and brothers, and particularly the affection, amiability and devotion to Bharat. But he recovered himself when he realized that the time was unpropitious. Perceiving this, Sita ji and Laxman felt distressed, even as the shadow of a man behaves just like him. When he saw the condition of his beloved consort and his brother Laxman, the self-possessed and compassionate Ramji, the delighter of the Raghus and the soother of his devotee's heart, began to narrate some sacred legends, hearing which Laxman and Sita ji felt relieved. Accompanied by Laxman and Sita ji, Shri Ramji shone in his hut of leaves, even as Indra ji, who dwells in the city of immortals with his spouse Sashi and his son Jayant. The Lord watched over Sita ji and Laxman, in the same way as the eyelids protect the eyeballs, while Laxman in his turn waited upon Sita ji and Shri Ram ji, the hero of Raghu's race, just as a fool who identifies himself with his body tends his own body. In this way the Lord, who was as friendly to birds and fawns as to gods and ascetics, lived happily in the forest. Thus have I told the delightful story of Shri Ramji's journey to the woods. Now hear how Sumantra reached Ayodhya. When the Nishad chief returned after escorting the Lord, he saw the minister Sumantra with a chariot. The minister was distressed to see the Nishad chief. Words fail to describe the agony with which he felt at that moment. Crying out, "Ramji, Ramji, Sitaji, Laxman!" He, Sumantra, dropped on the ground utterly helpless, while the horses kept looking on the south and neighed. They were as restless as birds shorn of their wings. They would neither eat grass nor drink water, while their eyes kept shedding tears. The whole party of Nishads was distressed to see the horses of Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line. Then, recovering himself, the Nishad said, "Sumantra, cease sorrowing now. You are a man of wisdom and a knower of the highest truth. Therefore, compose yourself, realizing that fate is unpropitious to you." Narrating various legends in soft accents, he took him by force and seated him in the chariot. But overpowered by the grief, he could not drive the chariot. The agony of separation from Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, was severe in his heart. The horses would not move along the road. They were getting fidgety. It seemed as if wild animals had been caught and put in harness. They would topple down and turn to look behind, torn away from Ramji and smarting with deep anguish. If anyone mentioned the name of Ramji, Laxman or Sitaji, Janakji's daughter, they would start neighing and regard him with love. How could anyone describe the anguish of separation the horses felt? They were as restless as a snake robbed of its gem. The Nishad was overcome with grief as he beheld the minister and his horses. He then called 4 trusted grooms and sent them with the charioteer Sumantra. Seeing of the charioteer, Guha returned. The agony of his separation was too deep for words. And the Nishads drove off to Ayodhya, plunged in sorrow every moment. Agitated and stricken with grief, Sumantra lamented, "Accursed is life without the hero of Raghu's race. This wretched body will not survive in the long run. But what a pity it did not earn fame by perishing at the time of its parting from the hero of Raghu's race. This life has become a sink of infamy and sin. I wonder what prevents it from departing. Alas, this wild soul has missed its chance. Oh, that my heart does not break in twain even now." Wringing in his hands and beating his head, he rued his lot like a miser who has lost his hoard of riches. It seemed as if after assuming the role of and posing as an eminent hero, a great warrior had taken to flight. The minister gave himself up to grief like a discreet Brahmana of noble descent, who thought well versed in the Vedas and esteemed by the virtuous, has been deluded into drinking. The minister felt in his heart agony as terrible as that of virtuous and discreet lady of high birth, who is devoted to her lord in thought, word and deed, and who is compelled by evil destiny to live apart from her husband. His eyes were full of tears and lacking in vision, his ears deaf and his mind was agitated and confused. Nay, his lips were getting dry, and his tongue had cleaved to the palate. Yet his life breath did not depart, the term of exile serving as a door to prevent its departure from his heart. He had turned pale and repelled the sight as if he had murdered his own father and mother. Great was the despondency which preyed upon his mind as a result of the loss he had just suffered. He looked like a sinner mourning while on his way to the abode of death. Words failed him, and he lamented within himself, "What shall I see on reaching Ayodhya? Whoever shall find the chariot devoid of Ramji will shun my sight. When the agitated citizens run to make enquiries of me, I shall answer them with a heavy load on my heart. When all the helpless and afflicted mothers question me, good God, what shall I say to them? When Laxman's mother Sumitraji puts questions to me, what glad tidings shall I convey to her? And when Ramji's mother Kaushalyaji comes running like a cow that has recently born a calf and has her thoughts fixed on it, the only answer I can make to her queries will be, Ramji, Laxman and Sitaji, Videha's daughter, have left for the woods. Whosoever question me must be answered. This is the treat I shall have on reaching Ayodhya. Again, when the king, who is oppressed by grief and whose life hangs on Ramji, puts questions to me, with what faith shall I tell him in reply that having safely escorted the princess, I have come back? The moment he hears the news of Laxman, Sitaji and Ramji, the king will drop his body like a piece of straw. The swampy ground of my heart did not crack, even though the moisture in the shape of my most beloved Ramji has left. From this I conclude that in this very frame God has endowed me with a body fit for suffering the tortures of hell. While Sumantra was thus lamenting on the way, his chariot presently reached the bank of the Tamas river. He politely dismissed the Nishats, who fell at his feet, and returned with a heart stricken with grief. The minister hesitated to enter the city, as if he had murdered his own preceptor, killed a Brahman, or butchered a cow. He passed the days sitting under a tree and found his opportunity only when it was dusk. He entered Ayodhya in the dark and slunk into the palace, leaving the chariot at the gate. All who heard the news flocked to the entrance of the royal palace to see the chariot. When they recognized the chariot and found the horses restless with their body wasting away as hail in the sun, the citizens, both men and women, were sore distressed as fish when the water runs short. The moment they heard of the minister's arrival, the whole gymnasium was restless. To him, the palace looked as dreary as though it were an abode of spirits. In deep agony, all the queens questioned him, but no reply came from him. His voice failed him. His ears could not hear, nor could his eyes see. He asked whomsoever he met, "Tell me, where is the king?" Seeing his confusion, the maidservants conducted him to Kaushalyaji's apartments. Arriving there, Sumantra found the king as pale and as lusterless as the moon without the nectar. Without a seat, couch or ornaments, he lay on the ground in a most wretched condition. Heaving a sigh, he lamented ever as Yayati when he had fallen from the abode of gods. With his heart bursting with grief every moment, he looked like Sampati, who had dropped from the heavens on account of his wings having been singed. that great lover of Ramji cried, Ramji, Ramji, and again, Ramji, Laxman, Sitaji. The minister, on seeing the king, exclaimed, Be victorious and live long, and made obeisance to him by falling prostrate on the ground. The moment he heard this, the king rose in bewilderment and said, Tell me, Sumantra, where is Ram? The king pressed Sumantra to his bosom as if a drowning man had laid hold of some support. Seating him affectionately by his side and with his eyes full of tears, the king asked him, Apprise me of Ram's welfare, O loving friend. Where are Ram, the lord of Raghus, Laxman, and Videha's daughter Sita? Have you brought them back, or have they left for the woods? At these words, tears rushed to the minister's eyes. Overwhelmed with grief, the king asked again, Tell me the news about Sita, Ram, and Laxman. Recalling again and again Shri Ramji's beauty, virtues, amiability, and temperament, the king sorrowed within himself. Proclaiming my intention to install him as regent, I exiled him to the woods. But the news neither delighted his soul nor grieved it. But my life did not depart, even though I had to part from such a son. Who can be such a great sinner as I? Take me, my friend, to the place where Ram, Sita, and Laxman are. If not, I sincerely tell you, my life is going to depart very soon. Again and again the king asked the minister, Communicate to me the news of my most beloved sons. Quickly contrive, my friend, some means whereby you may be able to bring before my eyes Ram, Laxman, and Sita. Recovering himself, the minister gently replied, Your Majesty is learned and wise. Nay, you are a leader of the brave and courageous, my lord, and have always attended assemblies of holy men. All painful and pleasurable experiences, loss and gain, union with and separation from friends, all these, my lord, take place under the unalterable laws of time and destiny, like the succession of night and day. Fools rejoice in prosperity and mourn in adversity, while the wise account both alike. Therefore, exercising your mature judgment, take up courage and cease sorrowing, O friend of all. Their first halt was made by the side of the Tamas river, and the next on the bank of the celestial river Ganga. Having bathed and drunk water, Sita ji and the two brothers remained without food that day. The Nishad showed great hospitality, and the party spent that night in the village of Shringwerpur. At daybreak they sent for the milk of the banyan tree, and the two brothers coiled up their matted hair in the shape of a crown. Then Ramji's friend Guha called for a boat, and after helping Sitaji to board it, Shri Ramji followed suit. Laxman placed on it in an orderly way the two bows and quivers as himself boarded the boat on receiving the Lord's command. Seeing my distress, the hero of Raghu's race summoned up courage and addressed me in sweet accents. Sire, convey my obeisances to dear father and clasp his lotus feet again and again. Then, falling at his feet, submit to him thus. Father, be not worried on my account. By your grace and goodwill, and as a reward of your meritorious acts, my journey to and sojourn in the woods will be happy and full of blessings. By your grace, my dear father, I shall have all sorts of comforts on my journey, and having obeyed your commands, shall come back safe to behold your lotus feet once more. Nay, consoling all my mothers, fall at their feet again and again, and with profuse entreaties make every effort, say Tulsidachi, to see that the Lord of Ayodhya, my father, passes his days happily. Clasping my preceptor's lotus feet again and again, give him my message. Pray, so exhort the Lord of Ayodhya that he may no longer grieve on my account. Humbly approaching all the citizens and all my people, convey to them my submission. He alone is my friend in every way, who ensures the king's happiness. Again, when Bharat comes, give him my message. Abandon not the path of rectitude on assuming the office of regent. Cherish your subjects in thought, word and deed, and serve your mothers, treating them all alike. Again, brother, vindicate your brotherliness till the last day by serving our parents and kinsmen. And last but not the least, look after the king in such a way that he may never sorrow on my account. Here, Laxman interposed some harsh words, but Ramji checked him and then entreated me, adjuring me by himself again and again, make no mention, dear father, of Laxman's childishness. Sending her greeting, Sitaji opened her lips to say something, but was overwhelmed with emotion. Her voice failed, her eyes filled with tears, and a thrill ran through her body. At this moment, in response to a hint from the chief of Raghus, Shri Ramji, the boatmen propelled the boat towards the opposite bank. So departed the crown of Raghu's race, while I stood looking on with a heavy load on my heart. How am I to describe my own anguish in that I came back alive bearing Ramji's message? At this stage, Sumantra's speech failed him. Overpowered as he was by grief and remorse due to separation from Shri Ramji, no sooner had he heard the charioteer's speech than the king dropped to the ground, his heart burning with deep anguish. His mind being unhinged by excessive infatuation, he tossed about like a fish that had been inebriated by sucking the foam of early rainwater, which is intoxicating to the fish. All the queens wailed and wept. How can their great misfortune be described? At the sound of their wails, sorrow itself was sorrowful, and endurance could no longer endure. Ayodhya was in great tumult at the sound of the outcry in the royal gymnasium. It seemed as if a cruel thunderbolt had fallen at night on a large habitat of birds. The life breath of the king had now stuck to his throat. He felt uneasy like a serpent robbed of his gem. All his senses were blighted as a cluster of lotuses in a lake that had been left without water. When Kaushalyaji saw the king withered and blasted, she concluded in her mind that the sun of the solar rays was about to set. Summoning up courage, therefore, Shri Ramji's mother spoke words appropriate to the occasion. Ponder in your heart, my lord, and reflect that separation from Ram is a vast ocean. You are the helmsman, and Ayodhya the bark, which has been boarded by our near and dear ones as its passengers. We can hope to reach ashore only if you have patience. If not, the whole family will be drowned. If you take to heart this entreaty of mine, my beloved lord, we are sure to see Ram, Laxman and Sita again. Hearing these soft words of his beloved queen, the king opened his eyes and looked up like a writhing wretched fish that had been sprinkled with cold water. Recovering himself, the king got up and sat down. Tell me, Sumantra, where is my gracious Ram? Where is Laxman and where is my loving Ram? Where is my beloved daughter-in-law Vaidehi? The restless monarch wailed in many ways. The night seemed to him like an age, and he felt as though it would never end. He was reminded of the blind hermit's curse, and he narrated the whole story to Kaushalyaji. He was filled with agony as he related the circumstances. Fie on the hope of surviving without Ram! What shall I gain by preserving this body, which has failed to keep my vow of love? O delighter of Raghus, who are dear to me as life, already I have lived too long without you, O Janakji's daughter and Laxman. O chief of Raghu's line, who gladdened the loving heart of your father as a rain cloud delights the Kataka bird. Crying, Ram, Ram, and again Ram, and yet again Ram, 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 the king cast off his body in his agony of separation from the chief of Raghu's line and ascended to the abode of God. It was King Dasharath-ji who reaped the reward both of his life and death. His untarnished fame spread through a number of universes. As long as he lived, he gazed on Shri Ramji's moon-like countenance and brought glory to his death by making the separation from Shri Ramji his excuse for it. Stricken with grief, all the queens wept and praised his comeliness of form, amiable manners, bodily might and majesty. They lamented in a variety of ways, throwing themselves upon the ground again and again. Men servants and maid servants alike wailed in anguish, and there was weeping in every house throughout the city. Today has set the sun of the solar rays, the perfection of the righteousness, the repository of beauty and virtues. Everyone abused Kaikeyi, who had dropped the world of its very eyes. In this way they wailed till the close of night, when all the great and enlightened hermits arrived. Then the sage Vasishtha-ji narrated a number of legends befitting the occasion and dispersed the gloom that hung over them, all by light of his wisdom. The sage caused a boat to be filled with oil and had the king's body placed in it to guard against decomposition. He then summoned envoys and spoke to them thus: "Run quickly and go to Bharat, but break not the news about the king to anyone at any place. Approaching Bharat, tell him only this much: the preceptor has sent for you two brothers." Hearing the sage's orders, the couriers rushed along with a speed that would put an excellent steed to shame. Ever since things began to take a vicious turn in Ayodhya, evil omens occurred before Bharat. He saw fearful dreams at night, and on waking indulged in all sorts of unpleasant speculations. He would feast Brahmanas daily and bestow gifts on them. With elaborate ritual, he would sprinkle water over an image of Bhagwan Shivji, and invoking the great Lord in his heart, begged of him the welfare of his parents, family and brothers. While Bharat was thus passing an anxious time, the courier arrived, and hearing the Guru's commands, he proceeded with an invocation of Lord Ganesha-ji. Urging the horses to run as fast as the wind, he went on his journey, crossing difficult streams, hills and forests. There was such a great anxiety in his heart that nothing would please him. He thought to himself, "Would that I could fly home!" Every moment hung heavy like an ear. In this way Bharat drew near to the city. Evil omens occurred to him as he entered the city. Crows cawed in an ominous way at undesirable places. Donkeys and jackals gave a cry that foreboded evil, and which pierced Bharat to the heart as he listened to it. Lakes and rivers, groves and gardens had lost their charm, while the city bore a particularly dismal look. Birds and fawns, horses and elephants were too wretched to look at, undone by the fell disease of separation from Ramji. The people of the city, both men and women, were extremely miserable, as though all of them had lost everything they had in their possession. The citizens met him but spoke not a word. They made obeisance and quietly passed on. Bharat too could not inquire after their welfare, his mind being obsessed with the fear and grief. The bazaars and the streets repelled the sight, as though a wild conflagration had broken out in the city on all sides. Kaikeyi, who was to the solar rays what the moon is to the lotuses, was rejoiced to hear of her son's approach. Preparing lights for waving round his head, she sprang up and ran glad at heart, and meeting him at the very door, conducted him into her apartments. Bharat saw with wonder that while the household wore a wretched appearance like a bed of lotuses blasted by frost, Kaikeyi was as happy as a Bhil woman who had set a whole forest ablaze. Seeing her son melancholy and depressed in spirits, she asked him, "Is all well in my mother's house?" Bharat assured her that everything was well, and then inquired after the health and welfare of his own family. "Tell me, where is my father, and where all mothers, and where is Sita ji and my beloved brothers Shri Ramji and Laxman?" On hearing her son's affectionate words, the sinful woman brought crocodile tears to her eyes and spoke words that pierced his ears and soul as so many shafts. "I have accomplished everything for you, my son, and poor Manthara has been of great help to me. Only God has marred our plans a little before they could be completed. The king has departed to Indraji's paradise." As soon as he heard this, Bharat was overcome with grief as an elephant who is terrified at the roar of a lion. Crying, "Father, father, oh my father!" he fell to the ground much agitated. "I could not see you before you left, nor did you, my father, entrust me to the care of Shri Ramji." Then, collecting himself, he got up with some effort and said, "Tell me, mother, the cause of my father's demise." Hearing the words of her son, she replied as one who had cut a vital part and inserted poison into it. With a glad heart, the cruel and wicked woman recounted from the very beginning all that she had done. Hearing of Shri Ramji's exile to the forest, Bharat forgot his father's death, and realizing in his heart that he was the root cause of it, he remained mute and stupefied. Observing his son's distress, she comforted him like one who applied salt to a burn. "The king, my son, is not fit for lamentation. He not only reaped a rich harvest of merit and renown, but enjoyed life also. During his lifetime, he obtained all the rewards of human existence, and in the end ascended to the abode of Indraji, the lord of immortals. Pondering thus, cease sorrowing and rule the kingdom with all its limbs, such as the army, the exchequer, and the ministers, and so on." The prince was utterly dismayed to hear these words, as though a festering sore had been touched by a live coal. Recovering himself, he heaved a deep sigh and said, "O wicked woman, you have brought complete ruin to our family. If you bore such deep malice, why did you not kill me as soon as I was born? Cutting down the tree, you have watered a leaf, and you have drained the pond for keeping the fish alive. Claiming my descent from the sun god, with King Dasharath ji for my father, and Ramji and Laxman for my brothers. I have had you, mother, for my mother. One are powerless against providence. The moment, O malicious woman, you contrived the evil design in your mind, how is it your heart did not break into pieces? While asking for the boons, you did not feel the stings of conscience. Your tongue did not fall off, nor did your mouth fester. How did the king trust you? Surely God must have robbed him of his senses on the eve of his death. Even the Creator has not been able to know the working of a woman's heart, the repository of all deceit, sin and vice. Simple, amiable and pious as the king was, how could he know the nature of a woman? What living creature is there in this world to whom the Lord of Raghus is not dear as life itself? Yet even that Ramji appeared to you as great enemy. Tell me the truth, therefore, to what species do you belong? Whatever you may be, you had better bedaub your face with ink and leaving my presence move to some place out of my sight. Nay, God has created me out of heart hostile to Ramji. Who is there so sinful as myself? In vain, therefore, do I taunt you. When Shatrughan heard of Mother Kaikeyi's wickedness, he burned all over with rage, but there was no help. That very moment came the hunchback Manthara, clad in variety of rich costumes and adorned with various ornaments. The very sight of that woman filled with Laxman's younger brother with anger, as though clarified butter had been poured into fire. Springing forward, he kicked her with such steady aim at the hump that she fell flat on her face and screamed aloud. Her bump was smashed, her head split, and her teeth broken, and her mouth emitted blood. Oh my God, what harm have I done? Surely this is an ill recompense for my services. Hearing this and seeing her vile from head to foot, Shatrughan, the slayer of his foes, seized her by the hair on her head and began to drag her till the merciful Bharat rescued her. The two brothers then called on Mother Kaushalyaji. In sordid attire, pale, agitated, and oppressed with woe, and with a wasted frame, she looked like a lovely celestial creeper of gold blasted by frost in the forest. When Mother Kaushalyaji saw Bharat, she sprang up and ran to meet him, but she felt giddy and dropped unconscious on the ground. Bharat was deeply moved to see her plight and threw himself at her feet, forgetting the condition of his own body. Mother, show me my father. Where is Sita ji and the two brothers, Shri Ramji and Laxman? Why was Kaikeyi born into this world at all? And if born, why did she not remain barren instead of bearing me, a blot on my family, a very sink of infamy and an enemy of near and dear ones? Who in these three spheres is so wretched as I, on whose account, Mother, you have been reduced to such a plight? My father is in heaven, and Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, is in the woods. It is I who, like a shooting star, am responsible for the whole trouble. Oh, be to me, who have proved to be for my family a very fire among the bamboos, and a victim of terrible agony, suffering, and censure. On hearing Bharat's tender words, Kaushalyaji rose with a renewed effort, and lifting him, clasped him to her bosom, while tears streamed from her eyes. Guileless by nature, Mother Kaushalyaji pressed him to her bosom with utmost affection, as though Shri Ramji himself had come back. She then embraced Laxman's younger brother Shatrughan. Her heart was full with grief and love. Everyone who saw her loving disposition said, Ramji's mother that she is, no wonder she should be so loving. The mother seated Bharat in her lap and wiping away his tears, spoke to him in soothing words. I adjure you, my child, to compose yourself even now, knowing this to be an unpropitious time, sorrow no more. Take not to heart the loss we have sustained and feel no remorse for it, remembering that the course of time and fate is unalterable. Do not blame anyone, my son. It is Providence that has turned hostile to me in every way. And when he makes me survive even under such trying circumstances, who knows what may be his pleasure with regard to me even now. At his father's command, dear child, the hero of Raghu's line discarded his ornaments and princely apparel and put on a hermit's dress consisting of the bark of trees without either sorrow or exultation. With a cheerful countenance and without either joy or anger, he comforted all in every way and proceeded to the forest. Hearing this, Sita ji followed him and would not stay, devoted as she was to Ram's feet. Laxman also, when he heard this, sprang up and accompanied them. He would not be left behind, even though the Lord of Raghus tried his best to detain him. The Lord of Raghus then bowed his head to all and departed with Sita ji and his younger brother Laxman. So Ram, Laxman and Sita left for the woods, whereas I neither accompanied them nor sent my soul after them, leaving my body here. All this happened before these eyes, and yet this wretched soul did not take leave of the body. I am not ashamed of my love, to think that a son like Ram should have a mother like me. The king knew well how to live and how to die, whereas my heart is 100 times harder than adamant. Hearing Kaushalyaji's words, Bharat and the whole gynecium wailed in distress. The king's palace seemed the very abode of sorrow. Much agitated, the two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, loudly lamented, and Kaushalyaji clasped them to her bosom. She comforted Bharat in many ways and tendered words of wisdom to him. Bharat too, in his turn, consoled all his mothers, narrating legends from the Puranas and Vedas. Joining both his palms, he addressed them in guileless, innocent, simple, and charming words. The sins attaching to the murder of one's mother, father, or son, and to the act of setting fire to a cowpen or a village of Brahmanas, and those incurred by slaying a woman or child and by administering poison to a friend or a monarch. Nay, all the major and minor sins of thought, word or deed that have been enumerated by the seers. Let all such sins be mine if, my mother, this plot has my concurrence. May Providence award me the fate of those who, forsaking the feet of Sri Hariji and Lord Shivji, worship frightful ghosts. If, mother, I have complicity in this plot. If, mother, all this has my approval, let me share the terrible fate of those who sell Vedas, exploit their piety, are given to backbiting and expose other sins, who are deceitful, wicked, quarrelsome, and irascible, who revile the Vedas and are hostile to the world, nay, who are greedy and lecherous and behave as the rapacious do, and who cast their eyes on others' wealth and others' wife. Nay, mother, if I ever knew this secret, my Lord Shivji allot me the fate of those wretches who love not the company of the virtuous, who have rejected the path leading to God realization, who worship not Hariji, even though blessed with a human form, and take no delight in the glory of Sri Hariji and Lord Shivji, who have abandoned the path of Vedas and follow the contrary way, and who are impostors and deceive the world by assuming false appearances. Hearing Bharat's truthful, artless and sincere words, Mother Kaushalyaji said, "You, my dear child, have always loved Ram in thought, word and deed. Ram is dearer to you than your own life, and likewise you are dearer to the Lord of Raghus than his own life. The moon may diffuse poison through her rays and snow emit fire. Nay, an aquatic creature may shun water and spiritual enlightenment may fail to eradicate error. But in no case will you turn hostile to Ram. Those in this world who alleged this plot was contrived with your connivance shall never attain happiness or salvation even in a dream." So saying, Mother Kaushalyaji clasped Bharat to her bosom. Milk began to flow from her breast and her eyes filled with tears. In this way they squatted away the whole night, lamenting in profusion. The sages Vamdevji and Vashishtaji then came and summoned all the ministers and the elite of the city. Vashishtaji admonished Bharat in many ways, speaking to him words of wisdom appropriate to the occasion. "Have courage in your heart, dear son, and do what the occasion demands today." Hearing this preceptor's commands, Bharat rose and asked everything to be got ready. He had the king's body washed in accordance with the Vedic rites and caused a most splendid funeral bier to be prepared for him. Clasping the feet of his mothers, Bharat prevented them from ascending the funeral pile. They all stayed behind in the hope of seeing Shri Ramji. There arrived many loads of sandalwood and aloes and divers other excellent aromatic herbs of untold varieties. The pile was raised in an artistic way on the bank of the Sharayu river and looked like a lovely ladder reaching to heaven. In this way all the rites of cremation were gone through, and then the funeral party bathed with due ceremony and offered a handful of water and sesame seeds to the departed soul. After ascertaining the views of all the Smriti texts, the Vedas and the Puranas, Bharat performed the ceremony of Dasharathji. Whatever orders the great sage Vashishtaji gave on a particular point, Bharat carried out all of them in 1,000 ways. He bestowed all sorts of gifts on attaining purity. He gave away cows, horses, elephants, and conveyances of various sorts. And even so thrones, ornaments and costumes, food grains, lands, money and houses, and the Brahmanas had all their desires fulfilled on receiving them. Whatever rites Bharat performed for the benefit of his father in the other world were more than 100,000 tongues could recount. Then, after determining an auspicious date, the great sage Vashishtaji came and summoned all the ministers as well as the elite of the city. They all repaired to the council chamber and sat there. The two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, were also sent for. Vashishtaji seated Bharat by his side and spoke to him words full of wisdom and piety. First of all, the great sage repeated the whole story of Kaikeyiji's willy-doing and paid his tribute to the vow of piety and truthfulness of King Dasharathji, who remained true to his love even at the cost of his life. And as the great hermit spoke of Shri Ramji's virtues, amiably and kind disposition tears came to his eyes and thrill ran through his body. Again, when he extolled the affection that Laxman and Sita ji bore towards Ramji, the enlightened sage was overwhelmed with grief and emotion. "Listen, Bharat, formidable is fate," the Lord of Sages sorrowfully exclaimed. loss and gain, life and death, glory and infamy, all these lie in the hands of Providence. Arguing this, whom should we blame? And with whom should we be angry without any cause? Ponder in your heart, my son, that King Dasharath ji is not worth grieving for. Pitiable is the Brahmana who is ignorant of the Vedas and who has abandoned his own duty and is engrossed in the pleasures of sense. Pitiable the king who has no knowledge of politics and who does not love his people as his own life. Pitiable the Vaishya, a member of the trading class, who is niggardly though rich, and who is not perfect in hospitality nor in devotion to Lord Shivji. Pitiable the Shudra, a member of the laboring or artisan class, who is disrespectful towards the Brahmanas. Loquacious and proud of his knowledge and loves to be honored. Pitiable again is the woman who deceives her own husband, is crooked and quarrelsome and follows her own will. Pitiable the religious student who breaks his own vow and obeys not the orders of his preceptor. Nay, pitiable is the householder who out of ignorance forsakes the path of duty, and pitiable the recluse who is attached to the world and lacks discretion and dispassion. Pitiable is the anchorite who has given up penance and developed a liking for luxuries. Pitiable the backbiter who is angry without cause and an enemy of his own parents, preceptor and brothers. Pitiable in everywhere is he who harms others, cherishes his own body and is exceedingly heartless. And pitiable in every respect is he who is not sincerely devoted to Sri Hariji. The Lord of Kaushala he is not worth grieving for, his glory being manifest through all the 14 spheres. There never was, nor is, nor shall be hereafter a monarch like your father Bharat. Brahmaji, Vishnuji, Shivji, Indraji, the Lord of Celestials and the guardians of the quarters, all sing praises of King Dasharath ji. Tell me, my dear child, who can glorify him who begot such pious sons as Ramji, Laxman, Shatrughan and yourself? The king was blessed in every way. It is no use mourning for him. Hearing and realizing this, sorrow no more and reverently obey the king's command. The king has bestowed the kinship on you. It behoves you, therefore, to redeem the words of your father, who abandoned Ram for the sake of his word and quitted his body in his anguish of separation from Ram. The king did not love his own life as he did his word. Therefore, dear son, redeem your father's word. Reverently obey the king's command. This will do you good in every way. Parashuram executed the command of his father and killed his own mother. The whole world will bear testimony to this fact. Yayati's son, Puru, exchanged his own youth for the old age of his father and incurred no sin or blame because he did so in obedience to his father's command. Those who cherish their father's word, minding not whether it is reasonable or otherwise, attain happiness and fair renown and dwell in the abode of Indraji, the Lord of Immortals. Therefore, you must redeem the king's word, cherish your subjects and cease to grieve. The king in heaven will receive solace while you will earn merit and good fame and shall incur no blame. It is well known in the Vedas and has the sanction of all that the crown goes to him on whose the father bestows it. Therefore, rule the kingdom, feel no remorse and accept my advice as salutary. Ram and Vaidehi's daughter Sita will be gratified when they hear of it, and no wise man will call it wrong. Kaushalyaji and all the other mothers too will be happy in the happiness of the people. Nay, He who will know when Ram returns home, you may hand over the kingdom to him and serve him with ideal affection." The ministers submitted with joined palms. "You need to obey the order of your preceptor. When the Lord of Raghus comes back, you may do what you think fit then." Summoning courage, Kaushalyaji said, "Salutary, my son, is your Guru's command. The same should be respected and obeyed by you as conducive to your good. Cease to grieve, realizing the vicissitudes of life. The Lord of Raghus is in the forest, and the king is in heaven, the abode of gods, while you, my son, are thus giving way to faint-heartedness. You, my child, are the only support of all, including your family, subjects, ministers, and all your mothers. Perceiving the antipathy of God and the relentlessness of fate, I adjure you by my life to have courage. Reverently obey your Guru's command. Cherish your subjects and relieve the affection of your family." Bharat listened to the advice of his preceptor and the ministers, appeal endorsing the same, which were as soothing to his heart as sandal paste. He further heard the mother's soft words, imbued with the nectar of amiability, affection, and guilelessness. Bharat grew restless when he heard Mother Kaushalyaji's speech, imbued as it was with the nectar of sincerity. His lotus eyes shed tears that watered the fresh shoots of the dissolution in his heart. All those who saw his condition at that time forgot their own existence. Everyone, says Tulsidas Ji, reverently extolled him as the perfection of artless love. Joining his lotus palms, Bharat, who was foremost among the strong-minded, took courage and proceeded to give fitting replies to all in words steeped as it were in nectar. "My preceptor has given me excellent advice, which has been endorsed by my subjects, ministers, and all. Mother Kaushalyaji too has enjoined on me what she has thought fit, and which I certainly wish to carry out with reverence. The advice of one's preceptor, parents, master, and friend ought to be acted upon with a cheerful heart as conducive to one's good. By pausing to think whether it is right or wrong, one fails in one's duty and incurs a load sin. You are surely giving me sincere advice, which, if followed, will do me good. Even though I fully realize this, my heart is not satisfied. Now hear my request and give me advice that may suit me. Forgive me my presumption in returning an answer to you, for good people reckon not the virtues of the faults of the distressed. My good lies in the service of Shri Ramji, although I have been deprived of that privilege through my mother's perversity. I have pondered in my heart and realized that my good lies in no other way. Of that account is this kingdom, which is nothing but an abode of sorrow, when the feet of Laxman, Ramji, and Sita Ji are no longer to be seen. A load of jewels is of no use without clothes. An inquiry about Brahmaji, the Absolute, is of little use without dispassion. Abundant enjoyments are of no use to a deceased body. Of little use are jap, muttering of prayers, and yoga, exercises of mind control without devotion to Sri Hariji. A handsome body is of no use without life, and all I have is not without the Lord of Raghus. Grant me leave to go where Ramji is. My good exclusively lies in this. And if you urge that you seek your own good by crowning me king, you say so only through ignorance caused by affection. It is through infatuation that you expect happiness from the reign of a wretch like me, who is Kaikeyi's son, of perverted intellect, hostile to Ramji and lost to shame. I tell you the truth, you should all listen and believe what I say. A virtuous man alone should be crowned as king. The moment you install me on the throne, perforce the earth will sink into the lowest depths. Who is such an inveterate sinner as I, on whose account Sita ji and Ramji have been exiled into the forest? The king sent Ramji into exile and himself ascended to heaven the moment the latter left him. My wretched self, which is the root of all evil, is sitting quietly and hears all talk unmoved. Even though I find the palace without Ramji, I have survived and endured the world's jeers. Devoid of attraction for Shri Ramji, who is a sacred object of love, my soul is rapacious and hungers for land, domination and enjoyment. I have no words to depict the cruelty of my heart that has attained notoriety by surpassing even adamant. An effect is, as a rule, harder than its cause, and I am not to blame for it. The thunderbolt is more formidable and harder than bone, of which it was made, and iron than rock, from which it is quarried. Clinging to this body born of Kaikeyi ji, my wretched life is exceedingly unfortunate. When life has been dear to me, even though I have been torn from my beloved brother, I shall have much to see and hear yet. Kaikeyi ji has sent Laxman, Ramji and Sita into exile and has done a good turn to her husband by dispatching him to the abode of immortals. She has taken widowhood and infamy upon herself and bestowed grief and affliction on the people. And to me she has allotted happiness, good reputation and a thriving kingdom. In this way she has served the interest of all. I cannot expect greater good than this at present. Over and above that you proclaim your intention to crown me king. Since I have been born into this world through Kaikeyi's womb, this is not at all unbecoming of me. God himself has accomplished everything for me. Why then should you all, as well as the people, help my cause? If a man who is possessed by some evil spirit and is also affected by delirium and has been further stung by a scorpion is given a cup of wine, tell me, what kind of treatment is this? God in his wisdom has ordained for me everything in this world that is worthy of Kaikeyi's son. He has, however, bestowed on me in vain the honor of being a son of King Dasharath ji and a younger brother of Shri Ram ji. All of you urge me to accept the throne, and the king's command is good for all. How shall I answer all individually? Let everyone gladly say what one pleases. Barring me and my vile mother, tell me, who will say the right thing has been done? Excepting myself, who is there in the whole animate and inanimate creation that does not love Sita ji and Ramji as one's own life. What is most baneful appears to you all as mighty gain. This is my misfortune, and none is to be blamed for it. You are in the grip of doubt, amiability and affection, and whatever you all say is right. Shri Ramji's mother, Kaushalya ji, is most guileless of heart and loves me in a special degree. Finding me in distress, she has said all this under impulse of natural affection. My Guru Vishishta ji, as all the world knows, is an ocean of wisdom. The universe is like a plum in the palm of his hand. Even he is making preparations for my coronation. When fate is adverse, everyone else turns hostile. With the exception of Shri Ramji and Sita ji, no one in this world will say the plot did not have my approval. All this I must hear and endure with a cheerful heart. For wherever there is water, mud must be there eventually. I shudder not to think that the world will call me vile, and I have little anxiety about the other world either. There is one terrible anguish that plagues my heart. It is that Sita ji and Ram ji are suffering hardships on my account. Laxman has fully reaped the reward of his existence. Discarding everything else, he has fixed his mind on Shri Ramji's feet. As for myself, I was born for Shri Ramji's banishment. In vain do I lament, wretched that I am. Bowing my head to all, I lay open my terrible distress before you. Unless I behold Shri Ramji's feet, the agony of my soul shall not go. I find no other remedy. Who else than the chief of Raghus can know what passes in my heart? There is only one resolve in my mind. At daybreak I must proceed to meet the Lord. Even though I am a vile offender and am at the foot of all troubles, yet when the Lord finds me before him in a suppliant mien, he will forgive all my faults and shower his special grace on me. The Lord of Raghus is an embodiment of amiability, meekness, extreme guilelessness of disposition, compassion and love. Shri Ramji has never injured even an enemy, to say nothing of me, a mere child, and his servant too, though hostile to him. Therefore, do allow me, all of you, to depart and bless me in an auspicious strain, knowing it to be for my good, so that on hearing my supplication and recognizing me as his servant, Shri Ramji may return to his capital. Though I am born of wicked mother and am myself a rogue and ever guilty, I am confident of Ramji that he will never forsake me, knowing me for his own. Bharat's words pleased all, imbued as they were with the nectar of devotion to Shri Ramji. The people who had been burning with the deadly poison of separation from Shri Ramji were roused to their senses on hearing, as it were, a charm against snake poison, along with its seed letter. The mothers, the ministers, the preceptor, and the people of the city all were overwhelmed with emotion. They praised Bharat again and again and said, "Your body is the very personification of affection for Shri Ramji. It is no wonder that you should say so, dear Bharat, since you are dear to Shri Ramji as his own life. The vile man who through his ignorance hates you because of your mother's perversity, the wretch shall abide in hell for 100 kalpas with millions of his past generations. A gem on the head of a serpent is not affected by the sins and faults of the serpent. On the other hand, it counteracts poison, sorrow, and indigence. Bharat, you have thought out a good plan. By all means, let us proceed to the woods where Shri Ramji is. You have held out helping hand to us, all while we were being drowned in an ocean of grief." Everyone felt as great a joy as when the Kataka birds and the peacocks hear a clap of thunder. When the people came to know of Bharat's welcome resolve to start the very next morning, they all began to love him as their own life. After reverencing the sage and bowing their head to Bharat, they all took leave and proceeded to their respective homes, praising as they went his amiability, affection, and exclaiming, "Blessed is Bharat's life in this world." They said to one another, "A great object has been accomplished." everyone began to make preparations for the journey. Whomsoever they left behind, saying, "You should stay behind to guard the house," felt as if he was smitten on the neck. Someone said, "Nobody should be asked to remain behind. Who in this world would not have the reward of his life? Perish that property, house, happiness, friend, father, mother or brother, who does not gladly help one to turn one's face towards Shri Ramji's feet." In every house they got ready vehicles of various kinds. Their soul rejoiced at the thought of starting early next morning. On reaching his own apartments, Bharat thought to himself, "The city, horses, elephants, houses and the treasury, everything belongs to the Lord of Raghus. If I leave it unprotected, the result will not be good for me. For disloyalty to one's master is the greatest of all sins. A servant is he who serves the interests of his master, no matter if anyone brings millions of imputations against him." Pondering thus, he summoned faithful servants who had never dreamt of flinching from their duty. Confiding to them all the secrets, he taught them their paramount duty and entrusted them with the work for which they were severely fit. After making all arrangements and posting guards, Bharat went to Shri Ramji's mother, Kaushalyaji. Knowing all the mothers in distress, Bharat, who understood the ways of love, ordered palanquins to be got ready and sedan chairs to be equipped. Much afflicted at heart, like the male and female Chakravaka birds, the men and women of the city longed for the dawn. They slept awake the whole night till it was daybreak, when Bharat summoned his wise counselors and said to them, "Take all that is necessary for the installation ceremony. The sage Vashishtaji will crown Shri Ramji even in the forest. Start expeditiously." Hearing this, the ministers greeted him and had the horses, chariots and elephants immediately equipped. Taking with him his wife Arundhati and the requisites for Agnihotra, offering oblations into the sacred fire, the chief of sages, Vashishtaji, was the first to mount the chariot and led the way. Hosts of Brahmanas, who were all repositories of austerity and spiritual glow, followed in vehicles of various kinds. The people of the city followed next. Having equipped their own conveyances, they all left for Chitrakoot. All the queens journeyed in palanquins, which were lovely beyond words. Leaving the city in the charge of faithful servants and respectfully sending the whole party ahead, the two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, started last of all, remembering the feet of Shri Ramji and Sita ji. Seized with a longing for the sight of Shri Ramji, all the people, including both men and women, headed with the same zeal as male and female elephants rush in pursuit of water. Realizing in their heart that Sita ji and Ramji were in the woods, Bharat and his younger brother journeyed on foot. Seeing their affection, the people were overcome with emotion and dismounting walked on foot, leaving their horses, elephants and chariots. Going up to Bharat, Shri Ramji's mother, Kaushalyaji, stopped her palanquin by his side and spoke in soft accents. "I adjure you by my life to mount the chariot, dear child, or else all our near and dear ones will be put to trouble. If you walk on foot, the whole party will follow suit, and you know they are all wasted with sorrow and hardly fit to undertake the journey on foot." Reverently obeying her command and bowing their head, at her feet the two brothers mounted their chariot and proceeded on the journey. They halted the first day on the bank of the Tamas river and made the next halt on the bank of the Gomati river. Some of them lived on milk and some on fruits, while others took their meals by night. Renouncing ornaments and luxuries, they observed vows and fasts for the sake of Shri Ramji. Halting on the bank of the Sai river, they resumed their journey at daybreak, and the whole party drew near to Shringwerpur. When the Nishad chief Guha heard the whole story, he anxiously thought within himself, what motive can Bharat have in journeying to the woods? He must have some evil design at heart. If he had no mischievous intention at heart, why should he have brought an army with him? He must have thought that after killing Ramji and his younger brother Laxman, he would reign peacefully and happily. But Bharat did not take to heart the maxims of the sound polity. Latterly, he brought on himself stigma alone, but this time he will meet a sure death. If all the warriors among the gods and demons combine against Shri Ramji, even they will fail to conquer him in battle. But what wonder that Bharat should behave as he is doing, for venomous plants, after all, can never bear fruits of ambrosia. Pondering thus, Guha said to his kinsmen, "Be alert all of you, collect the boats and sink them and blockade the ghats, that is, flights of steps leading to the river landing place. Equip yourself and blockade the ghats. Be prepared in every way to face death. I go to encounter Bharat in open combat and would not let him cross the Ganga so long as there is life in me. To die in battle, and that too on the bank of the Ganga, and to lay down this frail body in Shri Ramji's cause, when Bharat is Shri Ramji's own brother and a king, while I am an humble servant. It is through a great good fortune that one meets with a death like this. In the cause of my master, I'll fight on the battlefield and will brighten the 14 spheres with my glory. I am going to lay down my life for the sake of Shri Ramji, the Lord of Raghus, and will be a gainer either way. If I win the battle, I will have served the cause of my master, and if I die, I will attain the eternal abode of the Lord and his constant service. He who is not reckoned among the virtuous and is neither counted among Shri Ramji's devotees lives in vain in this world. He is veritable burden to the earth and an axe to the tree of his mother's youth. The Nishad chief, who was not the least troubled at heart, encouraged all, and fixing his thought on Shri Ramji, forthwith demanded his quiver, bow, and coat of mail. Make haste, brethren, to get ready the necessary equipment. On hearing my command, let no one shrink in fear. All right, my lord, they all joyfully responded and roused the spirit of one another. Greeting their chief one after another, the Nishads left. They were all brave and loved to fight on the battlefield. Invoking the shoes of Shri Ramji's lotus feet, they fastened their quiver and strung their bow. Nay, they donned their coat of mail, placed the helmet on their head, and straightened their axe, bludgeon and spear. Some of them, who were exceptionally clever at fencing, sprang with such agility that it seemed they never touched the ground and moved in the air. Equipped themselves with their weapons, etc., and forming themselves into batches, they all went up to their chief Guhaji and greeted him. Seeing his gallant warriors and finding them all fit for active service, he addressed them each by his name and duly honored them. Spare not your life, brethren, there is a great issue before me today. At this, the gallant warriors spiritedly exclaimed, Have patience, our brave chieftain. Through the majesty of Shri Ramji and by your might, my lord, we shall leave no fighting man or horse in the enemy's ranks. We shall never retrace our steps so long as there is life in us. Nay, we shall strew the earth with the trunks and heads of fallen warriors. The Nishad chief saw that he had a good band of warriors and exclaimed, "Beat the martial drum!" Even as he said so, someone sneezed on the left. The soothsayer said, "The sneeze has come from an auspicious quarter. The issue will be a happy one." An old man thought over the meaning of the omen and exclaimed, "Let us go and meet Bharat. There will be no conflict. Bharat is out to persuade Shri Ramji to return. The omen tells us that there will be no discord." On hearing this, Guha said, "The old man says right. Fools act precipitatedly and repent. If we come to a clash without knowing Bharat's intentions and ascertaining his temper and disposition, we shall be doing much harm to our own cause. Close up all my warriors and blockade the ghats till I meet Bharat and find out what is in his mind. When I have ascertained his friendly, hostile or neutral attitude, I shall act accordingly. After that, I shall test his love on the touchstone of his friendly disposition for hatred, and love cannot be disguised even if one tries to do so." So saying, he began to collect articles for making a present and sent for bulbs, roots and fruits, as well as birds and deer. Men of the porter class also brought loads of fat and dry fish of the Pahina species. Thus equipping himself with presents, he proceeded to meet Bharat and met with auspicious and happy omens. As soon as he saw the chief of sages, Vasishtaji, he mentioned his own name and prostrated himself before the sage from a distance. The sage, who knew him to be a friend of Shri Ramji, bestowed his blessings on him and told Bharat in detail about him. Hearing that he was a friend of Shri Ramji, Bharat alighted from his chariot and leaving it behind, advanced towards him with a heart overflowing with love. Guha on his part mentioned his village, caste and name and greeted him by placing his head on the ground. When Bharat saw him falling prostrate on the ground, he lifted him and pressed him to his bosom. He felt as if he had met Laxman, and the surging emotion of his heart could not be repressed. Bharat embraced him with great affection, and the people admired the mode of his love. Raising a jubilant cry of applause, the gods extolled him and rained flowers on him. This man is low in the eyes of the world as well as from the point of view of the Vedas, so much so that one must bathe even on crossing his shadow. Yet Shri Ramji's younger brother Bharat has met him in close embrace, his body thrilling all over with joy. Hosts of sins turn away from them who utter the name of Ramji even while yawning. As for this man, he was embraced by Shri Ramji himself, who thereby bestowed on him and his family the efficacy of sanctifying the whole world. Where the water of the Karmanash river joins the celestial stream, the Ganga, tell me, who would not place it on his head? The whole world knows how Valmiki ji became as good as a Brahma, God himself, by repeating the name Ramji in the reverse way as Mara. Even a Pariya, a Shavara, Bhil, a Khasi, the stupid barbarian and the wild Kola and Kirata get supremely sanctified and get renowned through all the spheres by uttering the name of Shri Ramji. It is no wonder it has been so for ages. Who has not been exalted through contact with the hero of Raghu's race? In this way, the gods glorified Shri Ramji's name, and the people of Ayodhya rejoiced as they heard the praise. Having thus met Shri Ramji's friend Guha, Bharat lovingly inquired after his health, welfare and happiness. Seeing Bharat's amiability and affection on that occasion, the Nishad forgot all about himself. His bashfulness, love and soul's delight grew, and he stood gazing at Bharat with unwinking eyes. Collecting himself, he bowed at Bharat's feet again and with joined palms lovingly submitted. Now that I have beheld your lotus feet, which are the very fountain of happiness, I have accounted myself blessed for all time. And now, my Lord, by your supreme grace, my welfare is assured for millions of generations. Remembering my doings and my descent on the one hand, and realizing the Lord's greatness on the other, he who does not devote himself to Shri Ramji's feet has been befooled in this world by providence. False, cowardly, evil-minded, and low-born as I am, and cast off from the society as well as from the fold of the Vedas in every way, I have become the ornament of the world ever since Shri Ramji took me for his own. Seeing his affection and hearing his humble submission, Bharat's younger brother Shatrughan embraced him next. The Nishad chief then greeted all the dowager queens in polite and respectful terms, mentioning his name each time. Treating him on the same footing as Laxman, they gave him their blessing. May you live happily for millions of years. The men and women of the city were as glad to see the Nishad chief as if they saw Laxman, and said, "He has surely reaped the reward of his existence in that our beloved Ramji folded him in his arms." Hearing them extol his good fortune, the Nishad chief led them with a cheerful heart. Receiving a signal from him and learning their master's will, all his attendants dispersed, and reaching the residential quarters, the foot of the trees, ponds, orchards and groves, they made room for the guests to take up their lodging. When Bharat beheld the town of Shrengwerpur, all his limbs were overpowered with emotion. Leaning on the Nishad chief, he presented a goodly sight. It appeared as if meekness and love had taken a living form. In this way, Bharat with all his army went and saw the stream of the Ganga, which purifies the whole world. He made obeisance to the ghat where Shri Ramji had bathed and said his prayers, and his soul was as enraptured as if he had met Shri Ramji himself. The men and women of the city bowed low. They were glad to see the divine stream. Taking a dip into the river, they begged with joined palms to be favored with abundant love for Shri Ramchandraji's feet. Bharat exclaimed, "Mother Ganga, your sands are delightful to all, and the very cow of plenty to your devotees. With joined palms, therefore, I ask of you only one boon, that is, spontaneous love for the feet of Sita ji and Shri Ramji." In this way, after taking a dip into the Ganga and receiving his Guru's commands, and on learning that all his mothers had finished their bath, he had the tents shifted. The people took up their lodgings at different places, and Bharat made inquiries about all. After worshipping the gods and taking leave of them, the two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, went up to Shri Ramji's mother, Kaushalya ji. Bharat showed respect to all his mothers by kneading their feet and speaking to each in polite terms. Then, entrusting his brother with the service of his mothers, he himself summoned the Nishad chief and went hand in hand with him, his body empowered with excess of love. He asked his friend to show him the spot and thereby soothe the agony of his eyes and soul to some extent, where Sita ji, Shri Ram ji and Laxman had slept at night. Even as he spoke, the corners of his eyes were filled with tears. The Nishad chief was distressed to hear Bharat's words and presently took him to the spot where the chief of Raghu's line had rested under a holy Ashoka tree. With great affection and reverence, Bharat prostrated himself there. Beholding a lovely litter of kusha grass, he paced round it clockwise and made obeisance. He also placed the dust of Shri Ramji's footprints on his eyes with an excess of love which could not be described in words. He saw there a few gold spangles which he placed on his hand and treated them on par with Sita ji. With tears in his eyes and a heart full of remorse, he spoke to his friend in sweet accents. These spangles have lost their charm and appear lustreless due to their separation from Sita ji. Even as the people of Ayodhya, both men and women, are spent through sorrow, to whom shall I liken her father, Janak ji, who in this world is a master of asceticism and enjoyment both? And she had for her father-in-law King Dasharath ji, the son of the solar race, who was the envy even of the Lord of Paradise, Indra ji. And her beloved Lord is no other than Lord Shri Ram ji, from whose glory all great ones derive their greatness. Even as I gaze on the litter used by Sita ji, the jewel among various women devoted to the Lord, my heart does not break in horror. It is harder than adamant, my God. And my younger brother Laxman is so comely and worth fondling. Never was there such a brother, nor is there, nor will be. Beloved of the people and the darling of his parents, he is dear as life to both Sita ji and the hero of Raghu's line. Nay, he is so delicate of frame and tender of disposition, and his body has never been exposed to hot winds. Yet he is bearing hardships of every kind in the woods. Oh, my breast has outdone millions of thunderbolts. As for Shri Ramji, he has illumined the world by being born in it. He is such an ocean of beauty, amiability, joy, and all excellences. Shri Ramji's disposition is the delight of the people of Ayodhya and his own family, much more of his preceptor and parents. Even enemies praise Shri Ramji, who steals the heart by his polite speech, agreeable manners, and modesty of behavior. Millions of Shardajis, goddesses of speech, and hundreds of millions of Seshas, serpent gods, are unable to reckon up the virtues of the Lord. That jewel of Raghu's line, who is bliss personified and mine of joy and blessings, sleeps on the ground, spreading the kusha grass on it. The ways of providence are inexorable indeed. Sri Ramji had never heard any mention of sorrow. The king, our father, tended him like the tree of life. Nay, all the mothers cherished him day and night, even as the eyelids protect the eyes or a serpent guards the gem on his head. The same Ramji now wanders through the forest on foot, living on bulbs, roots and fruits and flowers. Accursed is Kaikeyi, my mother, the root of evil, who turned hostile to him, her own husband, who was the dearest object of her life. And twice accursed is my own wretched self, the ocean of sin and the occasion of all trouble. While God created me as a blot on my family, my wicked mother has made me the enemy of my master. Hearing this, the Nishad chief lovingly comforted him. Why should you lament in vain? Shri Ramji is dear to you, and you are dear to Shri Ramji. This is a settled fact, and the blame rests with an adverse fate. Cruel indeed are the doings of an adverse fate, which drove Mother Kaikeyi mad. The Lord reverently praised you again and again that night. There is no one, says Tulsidas ji, so supremely dear to Shri Ramji as you are. I declare this on oath. Therefore, be assured that all will be well in the end, and take courage in your heart. Shri Ramji knows the heart of all. Nay, he is an embodiment of tenderness, affection and compassion. Considering this and summoning courage in your heart, please go and take rest. Bharat took comfort at the words of his friend and proceeded towards his lodgings with his thoughts directed towards the hero of Raghu's race. On receiving this news, the men and women of the city sallied forth to see the place where Shri Ramji had slept one night, much distressed at heart. Pacing round the spot clockwise, they made obeisance to it and blamed Kaikeyi to their heart's content. Tears rushed to their eyes again and again, and they reproached cruel fate. Some would praise Bharat's love, while others said the king had vindicated his affection. They would reproach themselves and praise the Nishad chief. Who can describe their confusion and woe? In this way, they all kept vigil overnight, and at daybreak the passage across the river began. The Guru was put on a good and handsome boat, and all the mothers on another newly built one. In an hour and a half, everyone was taken across. When Bharat had alighted, he made sure that all had come. Having finished the morning duties, Bharat adored his mother's feet and bowed his head to the preceptor, and sending a party of the Nishads ahead, started the whole host. He made the Nishad chief lead the van, and then started palanquins carrying the queen mothers, and summoning his younger brother Shatrughan, told off as their escort. The Guru proceeded next along with the other Brahmanas. He himself then made obeisance to the celestial river, invoked Sita ji, Ram ji and Laxman, and set forth on foot, while riding horses meant for the king were led by the bridle along with him. Again and again his faithful servant said, "Be pleased, sire, to mount your horse. Shri Ramji has gone on foot, while chariots, elephants and horses are intended for me. What behoves me is that I should walk on my head, for the duty of a servant is harder than any other duty." Seeing his behavior and hearing his polite speech, all his servants melted out of a feeling of self-disparagement. Bharat entered the limits of Prayag, the area surrounded the confluence of the Ganga and Yamuna near Allahabad. In the afternoon, overflowing with love, he cried, "Ramji, Sitaji, Ramji, Sitaji," even as he went. The blisters on the soles of his feet glistened like a dewdrops on a lotus bud. The whole company was grieved to hear that Bharat had made the day's march on foot. After ascertaining that all had finished their ablutions, he repaired to the confluence of the Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati and did homage to it. He bathed in the party-colored waters and with due ceremony, and honored the Brahmanas, bestowing gifts on them. As he watched the coming of the dark and white waves, Bharat felt a thrill of joy over his body, and he joined his palms in prayer. "You are the bestower of all desired objects, O King of sacred places. Your glory is known to the Vedas and manifest throughout the world. Abandoning the course of conduct prescribed for Kshatriya, I beg alms of you. But what vile act is there that an afflicted soul would not stoop to?" Realizing this in their heart of hearts, the wise and generous donors accomplish in this world the prayer of the suppliant. "I have no liking for wealth, nor for religious merit, nor for sensuous enjoyment, nor again do I seek the state of perfect and perpetual calm. Birth after birth, let me have devotion to Shri Ramji's feet. This is the holy boon I ask and not else. Let Shri Ramji take me for a wicked fellow, and let the people call me an enemy of preceptor and master. All the same, by your grace, may my devotion to the feet of Sita ji and Shri Ramji grow day by day. The cloud may neglect the Kataka bird all its life, and on its asking water may discharge thunderbolt and hail. But the bird will fall in the estimation of others if it ceases to call out to the cloud. It will gain in every way only by intensifying its love for the latter. Just as gold gets brighter by being put into the fire, even so the lover shines by sticking to his vow of devotion to the feet of his most beloved Lord. In response to Bharat's prayer, there came a sweet and benedictory utterance from the midst of the Triveni. Dear Bharat, you are pious in every way, and your love for Shri Ramji's feet is unbounded. In vain do you harbor depressing thoughts in your mind. There is no one so dear to Ram as you are. A thrill ran through Bharat's body, and his soul rejoiced to hear the agreeable words of the deity presiding over Triveni, exclaiming, Bharat is praiseworthy, all praise to him, the gods joyfully rain flowers. The inhabitants of Prayag, the king of sacred places, including anchorites, religious students, householders and recluses, were transported with joy. Meeting in batches of 5 to 10, they said to one another, Bharat's affection and amiability are artless and genuine. Hearing of Shri Ramji's charming virtues, he came to the great sage Bhardwaj. The sage saw him falling prostrate before him and looked upon him as his own good luck personified. Running up and lifting him, the sage clasping him to his bosom and gratified him by bestowing his blessing on him. Offered a seat by the sage, he sat down with his head bent low, as if he would run away and hide his face in a den of bashfulness. He felt much perturbed at the thought that the sage might ask him any question. Seeing his amiability and confusion of mind, the sage said to him, Listen, Bharat, I have already heard everything, but we have no control over the doings of fate. Be not distressed at heart by the thought of what your mother has done. It is no fault of Kaikeyi, my dear child. It was the goddess of speech who deluded her mind. Nobody would approve of it, even if I said so, for the wise recognize worldly opinion as well as the judgment of the Vedas. By singing your unsullied glory, however, the world and the Vedas both will be exalted. The world as well as the Vedas admit it, and everyone says that of king's sons he alone gets the throne on whom his father bestows it. The king, who was above all true to his vow, would have called you and bestowed the kingdom on you, and this would have brought him joy, religious merit and glory. But the root of all trouble was Ramji's exile to the forest, and the whole universe was pained to hear of it. It was, however, as fate would have it, much as the foolish queen Kaikeyi did wrong. She now repents for it, but he who lays the least blame for it on you is vile, ignorant and wicked. Even if you accepted the sovereignty, no blame would attach to you, even if Ramji would have been gratified to hear of it. But what you have done now is excellent. Your standpoint is quite justified, for devotion to Shri Ramji's feet is the root of all choice blessings in this world, and that is your wealth and life, nay, your vital breath. Who is then so highly blessed as you? This is, however, not to be wondered at in your case, who are a son of King Dasharath ji and a beloved brother of Ram. I tell you, Bharat, there is no one held so dear in his heart by the chief of Raghu's line as you. Laxman, Ram and Sita most fondly praised you the whole night. I came to know of the secret only when they were bathing at Prayag. They would feel overwhelmed with love for you. The chief of Raghu's line cherishes the same love for you as the fool does for a life of ease in this world. This is, however, no great tribute to the hero of Raghu's race who cherishes the whole family of the suppliant. As for yourself, Bharat, my opinion is that you are the very incarnation of love for Ram. What to your mind constitutes a slur on you is a lesson to all of us. The present occasion has proved very propitious for preparing elixir in the form of devotion to Ram. Your glory, dear child, is a new type of spotless moon, as it were, while Ram's devotees are like so many water lilies that open only in moonlight, and kakora birds that are equally fond of the moon. It shall always remain above the horizon and shall never set, nay, it shall never wane and shall ever wax in the heavens of this world. The Chakravaka bird in the shape of the three worlds shall cherish great love for it, while the sun in the shape of the Lord's glory shall never rob it of its splendor. It shall ever delight everyone by day as well as by night, and the demon Rahu, in the form of Kaikeyiji's doings, shall never eclipse it. It is full of nectar in the form of ideal love for Ram, and is untarnished by any stain resulting from a wrong done to the Guru. Let Ram's devotees now enjoy nectar to their heart's content, since you have made it so easy of access even on earth. Of your forebears, King Bhagirath brought down the celestial river, the very thought of which is a fountain of all choice blessings. As for Dasharath ji's virtues, they are more than one can describe. What more shall I say about him? He had no equal in the world. Won by his affection and meekness to Shri Ramji himself, appeared on the earth, Ramji, whom even Sita ji has never seen with his mental eyes to his heart's fill. You have created the peerless moon of your glory, which bears on it the figure of a deer, in the shape of love for Ramji. You feel distressed at heart, dear son, for no purpose. You fear poverty even though you have found the philosopher's stone. Listen, Bharat, I tell no falsehood. I am an ascetic dwelling in the forest and having no concern with the world. I obtained the happy and excellent reward of all spiritual practices when I saw Laxman, Ram and Sita. The reward of that reward itself is your sight, on which not only I, but the whole of Prayag deserves to be congratulated. Bharat, you deserve all praise, since by your glory you have conquered the whole world. As he concluded his speech, the sage was overwhelmed with love. Those who were assembled there rejoiced to hear the sage's words, while the gods acclaimed Bharat and rained flowers on him. Even as Bharat heard the shouts of applause in the heavens as well as in Prayag, he was overwhelmed with emotion. Experiencing a thrill of joy all over his body, with his heart full of Sita ji and Ramji and his lotus eyes wet with tears, he made obeisance to the conclave of sages and thus spoke in voice choked with emotion. Here is an assembly of sages, and we stand at place which is known as the king of sacred places. Great harm will come to a man if he states even a fact on oath at such a place. And if one tells a lie, there will be no greater sin and depravity. I speak out the truth, knowing as I do that you are all wise, while the Lord of Raghus has access to the inmost recesses of one's heart. I am not at all sorry for what my mother has done, nor am I troubled at heart over the thought that the world will look upon me as mean. I fear not lest I should spoil my future life, nor do I grieve over my father's death, whose momentous deeds and fair renown shine forth throughout the universe, who had sons like Laxman and Shri Ramji, who quitted his frail body as a result of his separation from Shri Ramji. Thus, there is hardly any occasion for lamentation on my account. What pains me is that, dressing themselves as hermits, Shri Ramji, Laxman and Sita ji roam from forest to forest without shoes on their feet, clad in deerskin, living on bare fruits, reposing on the ground overspread with kusha grass and leaves, and halting under trees, they ever endure cold and sunshine, rain and storm. It is this burning agony which is ever consuming my breast, so that I feel no appetite by day and get no sleep at night. For this fell disease there is no remedy. I have mentally ransacked the whole world. My mother's evil counsel was like a sinful carpenter who used my interest as a cause and fashioned out the inauspicious wood of discord, a destructive fixed term of 14 years, planted it in the soil of Ayodhya. It is for my sake that she employed this infamous contrivance and brought ruin on the whole world. This calamity will cease only when Shri Ramji returns. By no other means can Ayodhya thrive again. The sage Bhardwaj was gratified to hear Bharat's words, and everyone applauded him in ways more than one. Grieve not much, my dear child. All your woes will disappear the moment you behold Shri Ramji's feet. After comforting him thus, the chief of sages Bhardwaj said, "Be my beloved guest and deign to accept the bulbs, roots and fruits and flowers that we may offer you." On hearing the sage's words, Bharat was troubled at heart, for he was faced with a hard puzzle at a difficult time. Then, realizing the weightiness of an elder's command, he adored the sage's feet and replied with joined palms, "Your orders must be respectfully obeyed. This is my paramount duty, my lord." Bharat's reply pleased the great sage Bhardwaj, who called his trusty servants and pupils by his side. Bharat ought to be entertained, therefore go and bring bulbs, roots and fruits. They bowed their heads with the words, "Very well, sir," and most gladly proceeded to take charge of their respective duties. The sage anxiously thought that he had invited a distinguished guest and that a deity must be worshipped according to his or her rank. Hearing of his riches of various kinds, riddhis, the supernatural powers, siddhis, like anima, the power of assuming atomic size, appeared in a visible form and said, "We are prepared to do your bidding, O Lord." Bharat, as well as his younger brother Shatrughan and the whole company, are distressed due to their separation from Ramji, entertained them and relieved them of their fatigue. The great sage gladly said. The riches and supernatural powers in their embodied forms bowed to the command of the great sage and deemed themselves highly favored. The siddhis said to one another, "Shri Ramji's younger brother Bharat is a guest beyond compare. Bowing at the sage's feet, let us do that which may gratify the whole of the royal party." So saying, they erected beautiful dwellings of various patterns, which put to shame by their appearance the aerial cars of gods. they were replete with abundant luxuries and splendors which were coveted by mortals. Equipped with necessaries of all kinds, men servants and maid servants remained in attendance, focusing their attention on the pleasure of the guests. The Siddhis provided in an instant all the amenities which cannot be dreamt of even in heaven. First of all, they assigned to each of the guests quarters that were charming and comfortable and suited to the taste of the occupant. Thereafter, Bharat and his family were assigned quarters, for such were the instructions given by the sage. By dint of his penance, the great sage produced wealth that astonished the Creator, Brahmaji himself. When Bharat beheld the sage's power, the realms of all the rulers of the spheres looked small in his eyes. The luxuries were more than one could describe. The wise would forget their dispassion on seeing them. There were seats and couches, drapery, canopies, groves and gardens, birds and beasts of different species, sweet-scented flowers and fruits tasting like ambrosia, many a lake and pond of limpid water, foods and drinks of an undefiled and innocent character, which were more delicious than nectar and ambrosia, and which the guests would hesitate to accept like so many ascetics. Every house was supplied with a celestial cow, the cow of plenty, and the tree of paradise, Indraji, the king of gods, and his consort, Sashiji, grew covetous at their side. It was the vernal season, and a cool, fragrant, and gentle breeze was blowing. Everyone had all the four prizes of life, that is, religious merit, worldly riches, sensuous enjoyment, and final beatitude within one's easy reach. At the sight of luxuries like garlands, sandal paste, women, and the guests were overcome by a mixed feeling of joy and sorrow. Joy at the unique hospitality shown by the sage by dint of his yogic powers, and sorrow because at a time when they should abstain from luxuries of every kind, they were being offered the same. Affluence like female Chakravaka bird and Bharat as her mate were imprisoned together that night in the cage of the hermitage by the sage's order, which may be compared here with a playful child, and they remained there till it was dawn. Bharat and his party took a dip into the Triveni, the confluence of the Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati, the chief of sacred places, and bowed their head to the sage, Bhardwaj. Bharat reverently received his orders and blessings, and prostrating himself made much supplication. Accompanied by expert guides and taking the whole host along with him, he proceeded on his journey with his thoughts directed towards Chitrakoot. Holding Shri Ramji's friend Guha by the hand, he walked along like the very incarnation of love. He had no shoes and no umbrella over his head, and his love, self-discipline, austerity and piety were unfeigned. He asked his friend Guha to give an account of the wanderings of Laxman, Sri Ramji and Sita ji, while Guha narrated the same in soft accents. When he saw the spots where Sri Ramji had rested and the trees under which he had halted, the emotion within his breast could not be repressed. The gods who beheld his condition rained down flowers, the earth grew soft and the road became pleasant. The clouds afforded him shade all along, and a delightful and excellent breeze kept blowing. the journey was not so agreeable to Shri Ramji as it proved to be for Bharat. The numberless beings, both animate and inanimate, that saw the Lord or was seen by the Lord in their turn had been rendered fit for the highest state. The sight of Bharat now finally rid them of the disease of transmigration. This was no great thing for Bharat, whom Shri Ramji ever cherished in his heart. Even they who utter the name of Shri Ramji only once in this world not only reach the other shore themselves, but are also able to take others across. As for Bharat, he is dearly loved by Shri Ramji, and he is his younger brother too. No wonder then that the journey should be delightful to him. Siddhas, a class of celestial beings, saints and great sages, observed thus and rejoiced at heart to behold Bharat. Indraji, the chief of gods, was filled with anxiety when he saw Bharat's power. The world is good to the good and vile for the vile. He said to his preceptor, the sage Brahaspatiji, "Something must be done, my lord, to prevent the meeting between Ramji and Bharat. Shri Ramji is scrupulous by nature and is won by love, while Bharat is an ocean of affection. What has already been accomplished thus threatens to be undone. Therefore, finding out some stratagem, let us use it as a remedial measure." Hearing his words, the preceptor of the gods smiled and realized that, though endowed with 1,000 eyes, Indraji was really blind, lacked discernment. He said, "If anyone practices deception on a devotee of Shri Ramji, the Lord of Maya, it recoils on the artificer himself, O King of Gods. Last time we did something knowing that it had Shri Ramji's tacit approval, but by resorting to some underhand means, this time we are sure to meet with disaster. Listen, O Lord of Gods, it is Shri Ramji's nature not to be angry at any offense against himself. But he who sins against his devotees is surely consumed in the fire of his wrath. The story is well known, both in the world as well as in the Vedas. The sage Durvasaji know this glorious trait of Shri Ramji's character. Has anyone loved Ramji even as Bharat, whose name is ever on the lips of Ramji, while Ramji's name is repeated by the whole world? Never harbor in your mind, O Lord of the Immortals, even the thought of frustrating the purpose of a devotee of Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, for the same will bring you infamy in this world, sorrow in the next, and a series of vows in your day-to-day life. Hear our advice, O King of Gods. A devotee is supremely dear to Shri Ramji. He is gratified through service rendered to his devotees, and bears great enmity to those who are hostile to them. Even though the Lord is alike to all without either love or anger, and receives neither sin nor virtue, neither merit nor demerit, and even though he has made fate the ruling factor in this world, so that one reaps what one sows, yet according to as one possesses the heart of a devotee or an unbeliever, he appears to be impartial or hostile in his dealings. Though devoid of attributes, unattached, free from pride, and ever unchanged, Shri Ramji has assumed a form with attributes, yielding to the love of his devotees. Shri Ramji has ever respected the wishes of his devotees, the Vedas and Puranas, as well as saints and gods can bear testimony to this. Bearing this in mind, give up perversity and cherish ideal love for Bharat's feet. Shri Ramji's devotees are actively engaged doing good to others, share the sorrows of others, and are compassionate by nature. And Bharat is the very crest trail of devotees. Therefore, be not afraid of him, O ruler of gods. The Lord is true to his word and a friend of the gods, while Bharat obeys Shri Ramji's orders. You are feeling uneasy only because you are dominated by self-interest. Bharat is not to be blamed at all. It is your ignorance which is responsible for your uneasiness. The chief of gods, Indraji, was overjoyed at heart to hear these valuable words of the heavenly preceptor, and his depression of spirit was gone. The Lord of Celestials therefore rained down flowers and gladly began to extol Bharat's noble disposition. In this way, Bharat went on his way, while sages and siddhas were filled with envy at the sight of this condition. Whenever he heaved a long sigh with the word Ramji on his lips, it seemed as if love overflowed on all sides. Even adamant and stones melted at his words. The love of the citizens was beyond description. Halting at one place on this side, the party arrived on the bank of the Yamuna, and Bharat's eyes were filled with tears as he gazed on its dark water, which reminded him of Shri Ramji's swadhi form. At the sight of the lovely stream that possessed the same hue as the person of Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, Bharat and his party were plunged into an ocean of grief on account to separation from Shri Ramji, and were saved from drowning only by boarding the bark of discretion. That day they halted on the bank of the Yamuna. Everyone was provided with comforts according to the occasion. In course of the night, innumerable boats of untold varieties came from all ghats. At daybreak, the whole party crossed the river in a single trip. Everyone was pleased with the services rendered by the Nishad chief in this behalf. After performing their ablutions and bowing their heads to the river Yamuna, the two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, resumed their journey with the Lord of Nishads. At the head of the line, in chosen vehicles, travelled the principal sages, Vamdevji, Vashishtaji, and so on, followed by the royal host. Next followed the two royal brothers, both on foot. Their ornaments, costumes, and style of dress were all of the very simplest. They were accompanied by their servants, friends, and the minister's son, and went with their thoughts fixed on Laxman, Sita ji, and the Lord of Raghus. They lovingly saluted each and every place where Shri Ramji had either encamped or rested a while. Hearing the news, the men and women who lived by the roadside left their household work and ran after the royal travellers, and having seen their comely form and affection, they all rejoiced on attaining the reward of their life. One woman lovingly said to another, "Friend, can they be Ramji and Laxman or not? Their age, constitution, complexion, and comeliness of form are the same. Dear companion, their amiability and affection are also similar, and their gait too resembles that of Shri Ramji and Laxman. Only their dress is not the same, and they are not accompanied by Sita ji, my friend. And an army complete in its 4 limbs, that is, horse and foot, elephants and chariot, is marching before them. Moreover, they do not wear a cheerful countenance, and their heart is heavy with sorrow. This difference makes me doubt their identity with Ramji and Laxman, O friend. Her argument appealed to the rest of the women. They said, "There is none so clever as she." Applauding the latter and admiring the truth of her remarks, another woman spoke in sweet accents. She lovingly narrated the whole episode as to how the festivities in connection with Shri Ramji's installation had been obstructed. She then began to praise Bharat's amiability, affection, genial disposition, and good luck. Journeying on foot, living on fruits, and relinquishing the sovereignty bestowed by his father, Bharat is proceeding to persuade the chief of Raghu's line to return. Who can equal Bharat today? Bharat's brotherly affection, devotion, and conduct dispel the vows and evil of those who talk or hear of them. Whatever may be said with regard to them, dear friend, will be quite inadequate. It is no wonder that a brother of Shri Ramji should be like that. All of us who have seen Bharat and his younger brother have become praiseworthy among women. Hearing of his virtues and seeing his forlorn state, they lamented, "Surely he is not fit son for such a vile mother as Kaikeyi." Someone said, "The Queen Mother Kaikeyi is not to blame at all. All this has been accomplished by God, who is so favorably disposed to us. Of what account are we, vile women, excluded both from secular and Vedic rites, and impure by birth as well as by doings, who dwell in an accursed region, woodland, and in a wretched village, and are the worst of our class, that we should have such a sight, which is a reward of great religious merit?" There was a similar rejoicing and wonder in every village. It seemed as if a celestial tree had sprung up in a desert. At the sight of Bharat, the good fortune of the people by the roadside manifested itself as though by the will of Providence. Prayag had been brought within the easy reach of the people of Simhala, now known as Ceylon. Hearing his own praises as well as of Shri Ramji's virtues, Bharat went on his way thinking of Shri Ramji. Whenever he happened to see holy waters, he bathed in them, and whenever he caught sight of a hermitage or a temple, he made obeisance to it, asking in his heart only one boon, that is, devotion to the lotus feet of Sita ji and Ramji. Whomsoever he met, be he a Kola or any other forester, or even if he were an anchorite, a religious student, a recluse or a hermit, he would salute him and enquire in which part of the forest were Laxman, Ramji, and Videha's daughter Sita ji. They told him all the news of the Lord, and at the sight of Bharat obtained the reward of their life. Those persons who said they had seen the Lord doing well were counted as dear as Shri Ramji and Laxman themselves. Thus in polite phrases he would make inquiries from all and hear the story of Shri Ramji's forest life. Halting that day in a suitable place, he resumed his journey early next morning, invoking the Lord of Raghus. Just like Bharat, everyone who accompanied him longed for a sight of Shri Ramji. Auspicious omens occurred to everyone. They had happy throbbings in their eyes and arms. Bharat and his whole host rejoiced at the thought that they would be able to see Shri Ramji, and the sting of their sorrows would come to an end. Each indulged in his own fancy, and all went intoxicated with the wine of love. Their limbs were getting out of control. Their legs tottered, and they spoke words in an incoherent way due to emotion. Shri Ramji's friend Guha presently pointed to Bharat the crest jewel of mountains Kamadgiri, which was naturally charming, and in the vicinity of which, on the bank of the river Payaswini, dwelt the two brothers Shri Ramji and Laxman, along with Sita ji. Catching sight of the mountain, all fell prostrate on the ground with the cries of "Glory to Shri Ramji, the life of Janakji's daughter." The royal host was so overwhelmed with emotion as though the chief of Raghu's line had turned back towards Ayodhya. Bharat's love at that time was more than Sesha, the thousand-headed serpent king, could describe. It is as unapproachable to the poet as the bliss of absorption into Brahmaji to those who are tainted by egotism and mindness. Being all overpowered by love for the chief of Raghu's line, they had covered a distance of only 4 miles by the time the sun set. Perceiving a suitable site and water close by, they halted, and at the close of night, the beloved of Shri Ramji resumed his journey. There Shri Ramji awoke while it was yet dark. Sita ji saw in a dream that very night as if Bharat had come with his retinue, and that his body was tormented by the agony of separation from his lord. All who had accompanied him were sad at heart, miserable and afflicted, while her mother-in-law, she found change in appearance. On hearing of Sita ji's dream, Shri Ramji's eyes filled with tears, and he who rids others of their sorrow became sorrowful. This dream, Laxman, bodes no good. Somebody will break terribly bad news. Saying so, he took his bath with his brother, and worshipping the enemy of Tripura, Lord Shivji, paid his respects to holy men. After adoring the gods and reverencing the hermits, he sat down gazing to the north. There was dust in the air, and hosts of birds and beasts had taken to flight in panic and were making their way to the Lord's hermitage. Says Tulsidas ji, he stood up when he saw this and wondered in his heart what could be the reason. Presently the Kolas and Kiratas came and told him all the news. When he heard the delightful words, he felt overjoyed at heart. A thrill ran through his body and his eyes that resembled the autumnal lotus, says Tulsidas ji, filled with the tears of affection. Sita ji's lord became anxious the very next moment. What can be the reason of Bharat's arrival? Then somebody came and spoke to him thus: he has with him no small army, complete in its 4 limbs, that is foot, horse, elephants and chariots. Hearing this, Shri Ramji felt much disturbed. On the one hand, there was his father's command. On the other, his regard for his younger brother, Bharat. Realizing Bharat's disposition in his heart, the Lord found no proposition to fix his mind upon. Then he consoled himself with the thought that Bharat was submissive, good and reasonable. Laxman saw that the Lord was troubled at heart and spoke what prudence demanded on that occasion. I make bold, my lord, to say something unasked, but a servant ceases to be impertinent if his impertinence is not inopportune. You, my master, are the crest jewel of the all-wise, yet I, your servant, tell you my own mind. You, my master, are loving by nature and guileless of heart and storehouse of amiability and affection. You love and trust everyone and know all to be just like yourself. Fools given to the pleasures of sense are seized with infatuation on attaining power and reveal their true nature. Bharat is righteous, good and wise, and his devotion to the Lord's feet is known to the whole world. But now that he has attained Shri Ramji's, that is your position as the ruler of Ayodhya, even he has transgressed the bounds of righteousness. Finding an adverse situation and knowing that you are alone in the forest, this wily and wicked brother has plotted an evil design, and after making due preparations has come to make his sovereignty secure. Planning all sorts of wicked schemes, the two brothers have collected an army and marched here. If they had no wily intention and roguery at heart, who should like to bring chariots, horses and elephants? But why should one blame Bharat for nothing when we know that anyone in the world would be driven mad on attaining sovereignty? The moon god committed adultery with the wife of his guru, the sage Brahaspati-ji, while Nahus mounted a palanquin borne by Brahmanas, and there was none so vile as King Vain, an enemy of established usage as well as of the Vedic injunctions. King Sahasrabhu, Indraji, the Lord of Celestials, and King Trishanku, father of Harishchandraji, which of these was not brought into disrepute by the intoxication of kingly power? Bharat has resorted to a right expedient, for one should leave no trace of one's enemy or doubt in any case. But he has made one mistake in that he has despised Shri Ramji, yourself, as forlorn. And he will realize his mistake with vengeance today when he beholds Shri Ramji's, that is your indignant face on the battlefield. Even as he said, so he forgot his love of propriety, and the tree of his bellicose spirit burst into flowers in the shape of horripilation. Adoring the Lord's feet and placing their dust on his head, he spoke, revealing his own real and natural might. Pray do not take offense, my lord, if I tell you that Bharat has not provoked me not a little. After all, how long shall I endure this and restrain my passion when my lord yourself is with me and the bow in my hand? A Kshatriya, a warrior by caste and born in the race of Raghu, I am known throughout the world as a servant of Shri Ramji, that is yourself. How then can I put up with such insult? What is so low as the dust on a road? But if you were to kick it up, it would rise to your head. As he rose and with joined palms asked leave to meet Bharat in an encounter, it seemed as if the heroic sentiment itself had awoken from sleep. Binding up the matted locks on his head and fastening the quiver to his waist, he strung his bow and took an arrow in his hand. Let me distinguish myself as a servant of Shri Ramji today and teach Bharat a lesson in the battle. Reaping the fruit of their contempt for Shri Ramji, let the two brothers sleep on the couch of the battlefield. It is well that the whole host has collected at one place. I shall therefore give vent to my past anger. Even as a lion, the king of bees, tears to pieces a herd of elephants, or just as hawk clutches the carries of a lark, so shall I lightly overthrow on the field Bharat as well as his younger brother Shatrughan and all their host. Even if Lord Shankarji comes to his aid, I swear by Shri Ramji that I will kill him in battle. Seeing Laxman speak with such vehemence and fury, and hearing his solemn oath, all the spears trembled with fear, while their rulers were anxious to flee away in panic. The world was seized with terror, and a voice was heard in the air extolling the enormous strength of Laxman's arm. Who can tell, dear child? Nay, who even knows your might and glory? But before doing anything, one must judge whether it is right or wrong. Then everyone would approve of it. They who act impulsively and repent afterwards are anything but wise. So declare the Vedas and the sages. On hearing this voice from heaven, Laxman felt abashed. But both Shri Ramji and Sita ji addressed him kindly and politely. What you have said, dear Laxman, is sound wisdom. The intoxication of kingly power is the worst of all. But of those rulers who have tasted it, they alone lose their head, who have never waited on an assembly of saints. As for Bharat, I tell you, Laxman, in the whole of God's creation, I have never seen or heard of anyone so good as he. Bharat would never be intoxicated with the sovereign power, even if he attained to the position of Brahmaji, Vishnuji or Shivji. What, can a few drops of kaji ever split the ocean of milk? Darkness may swallow the midday sun, and sooner may the heavens be absorbed into a cloud, or the jar-born sage Agastyaji, who is stated to have drunk of the ocean in a single draught, be drowned in the water collected in a cow's footprint. Nay, the earth may abandon its natural forbearance, and Mount Meru be blown away by the puff of wind discharged from the mouth of a mosquito. But Bharat will never be intoxicated by kingly power, O brother. Laxman, I swear by you as well as by our father that there is no brother so good and innocent as Bharat. God, dear brother, creates the world by mixing the milk of goodness with the water of evil, while Bharat is a swan born in the lake of the solar rays that has sifted goodness from evil. Choosing the milk of goodness and discarding the water of evil, he has illumined the world by his glory. Even as the Lord of Raghus extolled Bharat's virtues, amiably and noble disposition, he was drowned in an ocean of love. On hearing the speech of Shri Ramji, the chief of Raghu's line, and seeing his affection for Bharat, all the gods were full of applause and said, "Can you name such a gracious Lord as Shri Ramji?" Had Bharat not been born into this world, who on this earth would have championed the cause of virtue in its entirety. Who else than you, O Lord of Raghus, can know Bharat's good qualities, which are unapproachable even to the race of bards? On hearing the words of the gods, Laxman, Shri Ramji and Sita ji were more delighted than words can tell. There Bharat with all his host bathed in the sacred Mandakini. Then, leaving all the people on the riverside and taking permission of his mother's preceptor, the sage Vashishta ji, and the minister Sumantra, he proceeded to the spot where Sita ji and Shri Ramji were, taking the Nishad chief and his younger brother Shatrughan with him. As he thought of what his mother had done, he felt diffident and formed ill conjectures of every kind in his mind. God forbid that Shri Ramji, Laxman and Sita ji leave the place on hearing my name and shift to some other place. Taking me to be an accomplice of my mother, nothing that might do would be too much. But looking to his own self, I am sure he will forgive my faults and receive me kindly. Whether he shuns me as one possessing a black heart or welcomes me as his own servant, my only refuge are Shri Ramji's shoes. He is really a noble master, while the whole blame lies with his servant, that is myself. The only beings deserved of fame in the world are the Kataka bird and the fish, who are clever in keeping ever fresh their vow of fidelity and love. Revolving these thoughts in his mind, he went on his journey, his whole body rendered powerless by diffidence and affection. The sinful act of his mother, Kaikeyi, dragged him back as it were, while the strength of his devotion pressed him forward, foremost among the resolute as he was. Whenever he thought of Shri Ramji's good nature, his feet moved quickly along the way. Bharat's gait at that time resembled the movements of a waterfly carried along the stream. Seeing Bharat's anxiety and affection, at that moment the Nishad chief forgot all about himself. Auspicious omens occurred, and the Nishad chief, after hearing of and reflecting on them, said, "Anxiety will pass away, giving place to delight, but in the end there will be sorrow." Bharat knew every word of his servant Guha to be true, and proceeding further, he drew near to the hermitage. When he saw the forest and the mountain range, he was as glad as a hungry man on getting excellent food. Just as a people tormented by the fear of calamities and afflicted by threefold troubles, as well as by the influence of evil stars and by pestilence, feel happy on migrating to a well-governed and prosperous country, Bharat too had similar feelings. The natural wealth of the forest grew while Shri Ramji lived there, even as the people rejoice on securing a good king. The charming forest was the sacred realm referred to here. Discretion was the king who ruled over it, while dispassion was his counselor. Likewise, the 5 yamas and the 5 niyamas constitute the champions of the realm. Mount Chitrakoot stood for its capital, while peace and good understanding represented the virtuous and lovely queens. In this way, the good king was complete in all the limbs of a good state, and depending as he did on Shri Ramji's feet, his heart was full of zeal. Having conquered King Delusion, with all his host, King Discretion held undisputed sway in his capital and joy, prosperity, and plenty reigned everywhere. The numerous hermits' habitations in the forest region were like so many towns, cities, villages, and hamlets comprising the king's dominion. The many birds of various colors and the beasts of different varieties constituted his countless subjects. The hares, elephants, lions, tigers, boars, buffaloes, and bulls presented a sight which attracted admiration. Shedding their natural animosities, they roamed about together like an army, complete in all its four limbs. Rills of water flowed and mad elephants trumpeted. Their noise resembled the beating of kettle drums of various kinds. Chakravakas, kakoras, katakas, parrots, and cuckoos and swans made delightful and merry concert. Swarms of bees hummed and peacocks danced, which showed as if there was universal rejoicing in that prosperous kingdom. Creepers, trees, and blades of grass alike were blossoming and bore fruit. The entire community thus wore a festive and delightful appearance. Beholding the beauty of Shri Ramji's hill, Chitrakoot, Bharat's heart overflowed with love, even as an ascetic who has reaped the fruit of his penance rejoices on the completion of his vow. In the meantime, the Nishad chief ran and climbed up an eminence and lifted his arm, exclaimed to Bharat, "My lord, look at those huge and noble trees of Pakar, the citron-leaved Indian fig tree, Jamun, the black plum, mango, and Tamal, in the midst of which stands out a beautiful and stately banyan, which is so charming to behold with its dark and dense foliage, red fruit, and unbroken shade, which is pleasant throughout the year, as if God had brought together all that was exquisitely beautiful and given it the shape of a dark and rosy mass. The trees in question, my lord, stand close to the riverside where the chief of Raghus has erected his hut of leaves. In front of it you will find a variety of charming basil shrubs planted here by Sita ji and there by Laxman. And in the shade of the banyan tree there is a lovely altar raised by Sita ji with her own lotus hands, seated whereon the all-wise Sita ji and Ram ji listen every day in the midst of a crowd of hermits to all kinds of stories and legends from the Agams, Vedas and Puranas. The moment Bharat heard the words of his friend Guha and saw the trees, tears rushed to his eyes. The two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, made obeisance as they proceeded. Even Sharda ji, the goddess of speech, felt diffident in describing their love for Shri Ramji. They were as delighted to behold Shri Ramji's footprints as a pauper who had stumbled on a philosopher's stone. Placing the dust on their head and heart, they applied it to their eyes and experienced the same degree of joy as they would on seeing the chief of Raghus himself. Perceiving Bharat's condition, which was altogether beyond description, beasts and birds and even inanimate creatures such as trees, etc., were overwhelmed with emotion. Overpowered by love, Bharat's friend Guha lost his way, but the gods showed it to him and rained flowers. God realized saints as well as striving souls were filled with love at his very sight and began to praise his natural affection. If Bharat had not been born on this globe, or if the earth had not witnessed his love, it would not have been possible to turn inanimate into animate and animate into inanimate beings. For the sake of gods in the form of saints, the all-compassionate hero of Raghu's line extracted this nectar of love by churning the unfathomable depths of Bharat's soul, and it was separation from him which stood for Mount Mandara that served as a churning stick. The two charming brothers and their friend Guha could not be seen by Laxman, screened as they were by a dense thicket. Bharat, however, saw the holy and lovely hermitage of his Lord, which was an abode of all fair blessings. Even as he entered it, his woe and affliction disappeared. It seemed as though a yogi had realized the supreme truth. Bharat saw Laxman standing before the Lord and affectionately answering his queries. He wore matted hair on his head and had a hermit's robe girt about his loins. Besides, there was a quiver fastened to his waist, and he bore an arrow in his hand and a bow slung across his shoulder. On the altar, in the midst of an assembly of hermits and holy men, shone Sita ji and the Lord of Raghus, who was clad in the bark of trees and had matted hair on his head and a swarthy complexion. It seemed as though Rati ji and the god of love had appeared there in hermit's garb. He was revolving his bow and arrow between his lotus hands and would dispel by one's smiling glance the anguish of one's soul. In the midst of a charming ring of hermits, Sita ji and the moon of Raghu's rays shone forth like devotion and the Supreme Spirit, who is truth, consciousness and bliss combined, incarnated as it were in a circle of wisdom. Bharat, as well as his younger brother Shatrughan and friend Guha, were so enraptured that their joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain were all forgotten. Uttering the words, "Protect me, my lord, save me, my master," he fell flat on the ground like a log. Laxman recognized his loving speech and concluded in his mind that it was Bharat making obeisance. On the one hand, there was the loving affection of an elder brother, Bharat, while on the other, there was the stronger claim of service to his master. He was, therefore, neither able to meet his brother Bharat nor ignore him. Some good poet alone could describe Laxman's state of mind. He threw his whole weight on the side of service and remained where he was, even as a kite flyer would pull against a kite that has risen high in the air. Bowing his head on the ground, he lovingly said, "Bharat is making obeisance to you, O Lord of Raghus." Overwhelmed with emotion, Shri Ramji started up as soon as he heard this, his robe flying in one direction and his quiver and bow and arrows in another. The all-compassionate Lord forcibly lifted Bharat and clasped him to his bosom. Everyone who witnessed the meeting of Bharat and Shri Ramji lost all self-conscience. How can the affectionate meeting be described? It was unapproachable to the poet in thought, word and deed alike. The two brothers overflowed with supreme affection. Their mind, reason, intellect and ego were all lost. Tell me, who can portray such noble love? By what shadow will the poet's mind seek to attain to it? The poet's solid strength lies in the theme to be worked on and the expression he uses. A dancer regulates his movements according to the cadence of the accompanying music. Unapproachable is the affection of Bharat and the chief of Raghu's line, which is beyond the conception of Brahmaji, the creator, Hariji, the protector, and Haraji, the destroyer of the universe. How then can I describe it, dull-witted as I am? Can an instrument strung with a cord made of a species of grass, known by the name of Gada, produce good music? When the gods witnessed the meeting of Bharat and the chief of Raghu's line, they were alarmed and their heart began to palpitate. The dull fellows were disillusioned only when their preceptor, the sage Brahaspati-ji, admonished them, and now they rained flowers and gave shouts of applause. After fondly embracing Shatrughan, Shri Ramji met the Nishad chief. Even so, with profuse love, Bharat embraced Laxman while the latter was greeting him. Likewise, Laxman eagerly met his younger brother Shatrughan and next clasped the Nishad chief to his bosom. Then the two brothers, Bharat and Shatrughan, greeted the host of hermits and were delighted to receive the blessings to their liking. In a rapture of love, Bharat and his younger brother Shatrughan placed on their head the dust of Sitaji's lotus feet and made obeisance to her again and again, while she lifted them each time and stroking their head with her lotus hand made them sit down. Sitaji blessed them in her heart. She was so overwhelmed with love that she lost all consciousness of her body. When they found Sitaji propitious in every way, they became free from anxiety and the imaginary fears of their heart were gone. No one uttered a word nor asked any question. The mind was so full of love that it had stopped its activity. Presently the Nishad chief collected himself and bowing his head submitted with joining palms. Stricken with grief due to separation from you, my lord, all your mothers, the people of the city, servants, generals and ministers, all have come along with the Lord of Sages, Vasishtaji. When the ocean of amiability, Shri Ramji, learned that his preceptor had come, he left Shatrughan by Sitaji's side, and the all-merciful proceeded at once with quick steps, a champion of virtue and self-possessed that he was. On seeing the Guru, both the Lord and his younger brother Laxman were overwhelmed with affection and prostrated themselves on the ground. The chief of sages, however, ran and clasped them to his bosom. He received them with a heart overflowing with love. Thrilling all over with emotion and mentioning his name, the Nishad chief too fell prostrate on the ground at a respectable distance. The sage, however, forcibly embraced him as a friend of Shri Ramji. It seemed as though he had gathered up love lying scattered on the ground. Devotion to the Lord of Raghus is the root of all choice blessings. With these words of praise, the gods in heaven rain flowers. There is no one so utterly vile as this man, and who is so great as Vasishtaji in this world. Yet on seeing him, the king of sages embraced him with greater joy than he did Laxman. Such is the palpable glory and effect of adoring Sitaji's Lord. Shri Ramji, the all-compassionate and all-wise Lord, found all the people restless, and therefore, meeting the wish of everyone according to the sentiment each cherished in his heart, he and his younger brother met them all in an instant and relieved their distress and terrible agony. This was no great achievement for Shri Ramji. The sun would as well cast its reflection in millions of jars full of water simultaneously. All the citizens met Nishad chief with a heart overflowing with love and praised his good fortune. Shri Ramji found all his mothers as stricken with grief as a row of tender creepers that had been smitten by frost. First of all, he met Kaikeyi-ji. and softened her mind by his guileless disposition and devotion. He fell at her feet and then soothed her, attributing the blame to the wheel of time, destiny, and providence. The chief of Raghu's line thereafter met all his mothers and consoled them by exhorting them in the following words. Mother, the world is controlled by the will of God. No one should, therefore, be blamed. The two brothers, Shri Ramji and Laxman, then adored the feet of their preceptor's wife, Arundhati, as well as of all those Brahman ladies who had accompanied her, paying them all the same honor as is due to the holy Ganga and goddess Gauriji, Shivji's consort, while the ladies gladly blessed them in soft accents. After clasping Sumitra's feet, they sought her lap, even as an abject pauper would hug a treasure. Both the brothers now fell at the feet of Mother Kaushalyaji, all their limbs overwrought by love. The mother most fondly clasped them to her bosom and bathed them with tears of affection. How can any poet describe the joy and grief of the occasion any more than a dumb man the taste of what he has eaten? After meeting their mother, the Lord of Raghus and his younger brother Laxman requested their Guru to accompany them. And on receiving the sage's command, the citizens encamped themselves wherever they saw a suitable site and water close by. Taking with them a few chosen people, that is, Brahmanas, the ministers, the queen mothers, and the preceptor, Bharat, Laxman, and the Lord of Raghus proceeded to the holy hermitage. Sita ji came and threw herself at the feet of Vashishta ji, the chief of sages, and received the suitable blessings solicited by her mind. The affectionate manner in which she met the Guru's wife Arundhati ji and the wives of other hermits was beyond description. Adoring the feet of all one by one, Sita ji received blessings dear to her heart. When Sita ji saw all her mothers-in-law, the tender girl closed her eyes in dismay. They appeared to her like so many female swans falling into the hands of some fowler. What has a mischievous providence done? She said to herself. They too were so distressed when they gazed on Sita ji. We must bear all that fate imposes on us, they thought. Janakji's daughter then took courage in her heart, and with her dark lotus eyes filled with tears, she approached and embraced all her mother-in-law. Earth was enveloped in pathos at that moment. Throwing herself at the feet of all by turns, Sita ji greeted them with utmost love. Overwhelmed with emotion, they blessed her in their heart. May you continue to enjoy a happy wifehood. Finding Sita ji and all the queen mothers shaken with emotion, the wise Guru bade them all sit down. Declaring the nature of the world to be illusory, the Lord of Sages gave them some discourse on spiritual matters. He then announced the king's departure to heaven, and the Lord of Raghus was deeply pained to hear of it. Thinking the king had died on account of love for him, the firmest of the firm was much agitated. Hearing the unpalatable news, which was cruel as the thunderbolt, Laxman, Sita ji, and all the queens broke out into lamentations. Nay, the whole assembly was so stricken with grief as though the king had died that very day. The chief of sages then comforted Shri Ramji, who, with all those present there, bathed in the heavenly stream. The Lord fasted that day, abstaining even from water. And even though persuaded by the sage, none else took a drop of water either. At daybreak, the Lord reverently and devotedly did all that the sage bade the delight of the Raghus to do. Having performed his father's obsequies as prescribed in the Vedas, the Lord, who was a sun as it were to the darkness of sins, became pure again. The Lord, whose name itself is a fire to the cotton of sins, and whose very thought is the root of all choice blessings, attained purity even as the heavenly stream is consecrated by invoking into other sacred waters. Such is the verdict of holy men. When 2 days elapsed after the purification, Shri Ramji affectionately said to the Guru, "My Lord, all the people are sore distressed, living as they do on bulbs, roots, fruits, and water alone. When I behold Bharat and his younger brother Shatrughan, the ministers and all my mothers, every minute that passes seems as an age to me. Therefore, pray return to the city with all, for you are here, and the king, my father, is in heaven. There is no one to look after the city. I have said too much, and all this amounts of gross presumption on my part. Now, my lord, do what is proper. It is no wonder, Ram, that you should speak like this. A bulwark of righteousness and a home of compassion that you are. But grieved as the people are, let them derive solace by enjoying your sight for a couple of days." At the words of Shri Ramji, the assembly trembled with fear like a ship tossed on the ocean. When, however, they heard the auspicious words of the Guru, it seemed as though the wind had turned in their favor. Thrice in the day, in the morning, at noon, and in the evening, they bathed in the holy Payasvini river, the very sight of which wipes out the hosts of sins, ever feasting their eyes on Shri Ramji's, the incarnation of blessedness, and gladly prostrating themselves before him again and again. They were out to see the hill and woods hallowed by the presence of Shri Ramji, where reigned joy of every kind, and which was free from all sorrows. Water sweet as nectar flowed from springs, while soft, cool, and fragrant breezes soothed every pain of mind and body. Trees, creepers, and grasses of infinite variety, fruits, flowers, and leaves of many kinds, beautiful slabs of stone, and the delightful shade of trees, the splendor of the forest was beyond description. Lotuses adorned the lakes, water flows cooed, and bees hummed, while birds and beasts of various colors roamed about in the forest, free from animosities. The kolas, kiratas, bheels, and other dwellers of the forest prepared lovely bubbles of leaves, and filling them with honey, pure, fine, and delicious as nectar, presented them with small bundles of bulbs, roots, fruits, and sprouts to all the newcomers with humble submission and salutations, severely mentioning the taste, species, virtues, and name of each.